Chapter 24:01. The little snake bit towards Tian Shuiqing's back like lightning. "Master, be careful behind you," Wang Kai shouted, and then knocked Tian Shuiqing away. The little snake bit Wang Cai's body. Tian Shuiqing was knocked away by Wang Kai and knelt on the ground. She ignored the pain in her waist and hurriedly turned around to look for Wang Kai. Wang Cai's pink body turned dark green at a speed visible to the naked eye. The little pig was twitching. It could be seen how strong the poison of the hell snake was. Tian Shuiqing's heart sank, and her mind went blank. She pulled out her hidden blade with a schwa sound and stabbed at the little blue snake. Although Tian Shuiqing's martial arts were not strong, her calculation ability was extraordinary. Although the sword was hurried, she was not panicked. She had calculated the angle and was sure that she could stab that damn snake. However, she did not expect that the moment she stabbed it, the snake actually dodged with lightning speed and bit her wrist with great accuracy and viciousness. Tian Shuiqing was shocked and reflexively blocked with her hand. The snake bit the sword, and the green venom flowed along the sword. Wherever the venom passed, the sword would be corroded. Tian Shuiqing's pupils shrank, and she threw the sword and the snake away. Then she bent down and quickly picked up the little pig, turned around, and ran away. While running, she patted the little pig in her arms. Wang Kai, wake up!" She was very anxious. If Wang Cai's poison was not cured, it would be fatal. But she had no time to protect herself, so she did not have time to detoxify Wang Kai. Wang Kai groaned and slowly woke up. Its vision was very blurry, and the venom had already entered its eyes. It said weakly, "Master, put me down. Wang Kai can't live anymore." Tian Shuiqing's heart ached, and her nose was sour. Tears almost fell out, but she held it back and said with a fierce voice, "No, even if I die, I won't put you down." She ran with all her strength and was panting, but she was still not as fast as the little snake. She sprinkled a handful of poisonous powder from her arms, but it did not have any effect. The little snake was not affected at all. The little snake grew bigger and bigger behind her. In the blink of an eye, the little snake grew to a few meters long and as thick as a thigh. The little pig's vision gradually darkened. Before it lost consciousness, it murmured, "Master, in the next life, Wang Kai will still be yours." Tian Shuiqing's tears dripped down and landed on the dark green piglet. The piglet seemed to have been woken up by the heat. It suddenly trembled and struggled violently. Tian Shuiqing was caught off guard, and it actually managed to break free. The piglet then pounced on the several-meter-long snake behind it. Bolts of lightning struck the nether snake, causing it to retreat a few feet. Wang Kai used the last of its strength to shout, but it was too weak to do so. It could only whisper, "Master, run." Tian Shuiqing heard his murmur and stopped abruptly. She looked at Wang Kai, who was lying motionless on the ground. Her heart ached so much that she couldn't breathe. She didn't know when, but tears had already covered her face. Or stay. The netherworld snake slowly approached Wang Kai, as if it was ready to eat. At that moment, a clear sword light flashed and flew towards the netherworld snake from a tricky angle. The netherworld snake did not manage to dodge it completely and was cut in its body. Fresh red blood flowed out. Who was it? Chapter 24:02. Tian Shuiqing was startled. Her vision blurred as she saw a light-colored figure flying towards her from the horizon. His white robes fluttered in the wind as a brilliant golden light enveloped his body, making him extremely dazzling. He was like the sun, bringing hope and light to her desperate situation. "Ji and Wang." Tian Shuiqing's heart skipped a beat. She opened her mouth slightly. Ji and Wang's gaze turned cold. "Why didn't you call me when you came here?" Tian Shuiqing had yet to regain her senses from the shock. Yesterday, he had left in a huff, which made her feel uncomfortable. Furthermore, she had little pig Wang Kai, who could use the lightning technique, by her side, so she came alone. She took a deep breath. "I didn't think it would be so dangerous. I used to pick herbs alone." She was just used to being alone. After saying this, she hurriedly looked at little pig. Suddenly, she screamed, "Save Wang Kai." The The snake had not given up on Little Pig. Its long body flashed as it pounced on Little Pig, who had fallen to the ground. The sword light suddenly flashed, and with a sharp whistling sound, it formed a blue sword array and trapped the hell snake. No matter how nimble it was, it could not escape from this inescapable net. Its body was pierced several times, and its blood dyed the grass red. It slowly seeped into the soil, and the grass seemed to have been corroded by its blood as it was instantly charred black. The hell snake softly fell to the ground, its breath weak. Ji and Huang trapped the hell snake, but did not immediately kill it. He took out a small jade bottle from somewhere and took some of its blood. Then he used a special method to extract the hell snake's venom and dripped it into the jade bottle. After that, he killed the hell snake with a single slash. Then, he turned his sword and took out its green inner core. He cast a cleansing spell on it and threw it to Tian Xueqing along with the bottle. Ji and Huang peeled the snake's skin and said indifferently, "Let Wang Kai take the inner core first. Half of the antidote in the bottle should be taken externally, and the other half should be taken orally." Tian Xueqing caught it, nodded, and ran towards Wang Kai. Tian Xueqing understood this method of detoxification, but she did not expect Ji and Huang to know it so clearly and be so familiar with it. Tian Xueqing took the jade bottle and pressed it on a certain spot on Wang Kai's body. Wang Kai involuntarily opened its mouth. She fed Wang Kai the nether snake's nether elixir and then applied half of the antidote on the outside and the other half on the inside. She didn't bring any bandages and was about to tear off a piece of her dress to bandage Wang Kai's wound when a long snake suddenly appeared in front of her. Her face paled. She did not know when Ji and Huang had finished skinning the snake. At this moment, he was standing beside her with a small strip of snake skin in his hand. Use the snake skin of the netherworld snake to bandage Wang Kai. It will help it recover faster. Tian Xueqing looked at the snake skin and was stunned for a moment, but she still took it. Her actions were fast and professional. In just a moment, Wang Kai's wound was bandaged. The antidote took effect very quickly. The dark green piglet's color began to fade bit by bit. It was no longer as green as before. After Tian Xueqing finished treating Wang Kai's wound, she suddenly saw a spot of blood on Ji Yunhuang's left hand. She instinctively grabbed his hand and pried his palm open. It was scarlet. Although it was not deep enough to see the bone, it was still very deep. She could see the bright red blood slowly seeping out. "How did you get injured?" she nervously blurted out. Ji Yunhuang pursed his lips. "I was cut by grass. It's nothing." Chapter 24:03. Yesterday, he was a little sad and tossed, and turned in bed for half the night, thinking about what he should do. He only fell asleep at dawn and woke up a little later in the morning. After thinking for a while, he decided to look for her. However, he did not expect Xiao Tong to tell him that she went to Mount Qinghua early in the morning to pick herbs. Ji Yunhuang's expression changed greatly. He had wandered the Jianghu for many years and was very familiar with herbs and mountains. He knew that the place where the netherworld flower grew was not only dangerous, but also had the netherworld snake as its guardian beast. With Tian Xueqing's mediocre skills, she was definitely not the netherworld snake's opponent. His heart was burning with anxiety. When he was climbing the mountain, he was careless and almost fell down. He hurriedly grabbed onto a bunch of grass to stabilize himself, but the edge of the grass was full of jagged edges at the critical moment. He saved Tian Xueqing and her Wang Kai. Although he was thankful for his luck, the anger in his heart also rose, and his expression was not good. He was the grand disciple of the venerable emperor, but he was actually injured by grass. He also felt a little embarrassed and wanted to withdraw his hand. However, Tian Xueqing's small hand held onto his, and she frowned slightly. "Don't move. I'll bandage your wound." Her voice was gentle like a wisp of wind blowing through his heart. Ji Yunhuang's heart warmed and his body stiffened. Sure enough, he did not move. Her small hand moved around his palm, and he could clearly feel the temperature of her fingertips. It was still a little cold. It was obvious that she was badly frightened just now. Ji Yunhuang looked down at Tian Xueqing, who was busying herself with his wound, and he was a little dazed. This scene was so familiar, just like those warm but sorrowful days 100 years ago, when the spring breeze brought warmth and he was slightly injured, but he could clearly see the pain in her eyes. She would silently sit by the side and carefully bandage his wound. From this angle, he could see her fluttering eyelashes, long and curled, like a small fan. Now that this scene appeared again, Ji and Huang felt both satisfied and sad. Fate was like a strange circle. After experiencing the heart-wrenching pain of being separated by life and death, she was once again brought to his side. All right, don't let the wound get wet. Try not to use too much strength. Don't eat spicy food for the next few days. Tian Xueqing carefully adjusted the angle of the bandage as she instructed him. Halfway through, she remembered that he was also a very skilled doctor. She couldn't help but say in a low voice, "I'm too long-winded. I forgot that you also know about this." Ji and Huang lowered his eyes and looked at the azure bandage on his palm, lost in thought. A gentle breeze blew past, and the slightly longer edge of the bandage was blown up by the wind. It tickled his palm, causing him to feel a slight itch. His heart felt like it was being scratched by a kitten's little paw. It was slightly itchy. The little bit of unhappiness he once had also vanished in a thin air. Why was he so angry with her? After all, she did not know anything. Bitterness welled up in his heart. He closed his eyes slightly and calmed his churning emotions. When he opened his eyes again, it was already clear. He looked at her and said, "No, I don't know." He had always treated her concern as a treasure, so how could he find her nagging? Tian Xueqing stared blankly for a moment. She suspiciously raised her eyes and looked into his warm eyes. His eyes were dark like the stars in the cold night. At this moment, there was a faint warmth in them, like the radiance of the silver moon. Tian Xueqing saw herself in his eyes. Her heart suddenly jumped, and her mind was in a daze. It was as if he had seen his eyes like this a long, long time ago. Chapter 2404. However, the person he was looking at did not seem to be her. It was as if someone had plucked a string in her heart, causing her to tremble and feel pain. She looked at him with a puzzled expression, but her eyes were clear. His figure was clearly reflected in her pair of big eyes. Ji and Huang's mind was shaken and his heart was in turmoil. He lifted his arm and pulled her into his embrace. His voice was like a sigh as he said, "Xueqing." He was taking advantage of her again. Tian Xueqing's body stiffened. Just as she was about to push him away, his body swayed slightly as if he was about to fall. Tian Xueqing was shocked and did not dare to push him away. Instead, she hugged him tightly and asked, "What's wrong with you?" She was small and short, so it was naturally difficult for her to hug the tall and big Ji and Huang. Ji and Huang naturally did not dare to press his entire body on top of hers. He only slightly closed his eyes and said, "I feel a little dizzy. Could it be that you were poisoned when you were skinning the snake?" Tian Xueqing guessed. She grabbed his hand and wanted to check his pulse. However, Ji and Huang held her hand and said in a low voice, "Don't move. I'll be fine after a while." Tian Xueqing was speechless. She wanted to support him to the big rock at the side to sit down and rest. However, she did not expect that when she moved, he would hold her tightly and said, "Don't move. If you move, I'll feel dizzy." Tian Xueqing was stunned for a moment. All right, since he risked his life to save her and Piglet, she would let him lean on her for a while. His cold breath was like the water of an icy spring. When it reached her nose, her heart could not help but beat faster. There was a faint feeling of familiarity in her heart. It was as if she had smelled this kind of breath before and was greedy for this kind of breath. She did not know what was wrong with her. When he hugged her like this, she actually felt a faint sense of satisfaction and laziness after her desire was satisfied. This feeling made her subconsciously feel afraid. It was as if once she was greedy for this kind of feeling, she would be sent to the 18th level of hell. This kind of fear came suddenly, but it was so clear. Her body instantly stiffened like a piece of wood. The scent of the person in his arms was both familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Back then, Tian Xueqing often had a faint medicinal fragrance on her body. That medicinal fragrance was actually very intoxicating, but he only felt annoyed at that time. Every time he had no choice but to do it with her, He felt like he was being trapped and schemed against. So every time he was done, he would impatiently slam the door and leave, not even looking at her who was lying there in despair. He could not think about the past. Once he thought about it, he would regret it from head to toe. Fortunately, he found her again. That should be her, right? His name was, his appearance was, and his aura was. Yun Huang half-hugged Tian Xueqing and sent a wisp of psychokinesis into her body. Tian Xueqing's soul gradually appeared in his mind. Exquisite facial features, an ethereal and indifferent aura, and eyes that were eternally calm. Even though 100 years had passed since then, she was still so familiar when he saw her again. His memory was so fresh that it was as if it had just happened yesterday. It really was her. It really was her. His sixth sense was right. Although he was already mentally prepared, once he confirmed it, the joy in his heart still overflowed after 100 years. He had finally found her again. He hugged her even tighter. His heart ached as if he was drowning, and his voice sounded like he was sighing, Xueqing. He hugged her so tightly that Tian Xueqing's body became stiffer and stiffer. In the end, she was as stiff as a stone statue. Chapter 2405. Yinhuang finally he sensed that something was wrong. He loosened his embrace and looked at her. What happened to you? Tian Xueqing raised her eyes and glanced at him. This glance made Yinhuang's heart turn cold. There was an obvious alienation in her eyes, and her voice was cold and angry. You probe my soul? Who do you think I am? Yinhuang was stunned. For a moment, the atmosphere was so quiet that it was scary. Even the wind in the canyon slowed down. Tian Xueqing looked at him and felt more and more disappointed. She coldly looked away. If you don't want to say, then forget it. Right at this moment, Wang Kai Piglet suddenly groaned and slowly woke up. Tian Xueqing glanced at him and turned to walk towards Wang Kai. Wang Kai's body had already regained its pink color. It stood up shakily and threw itself into Tian Xueqing's embrace. Master, I thought I would never see you again. Tian Xueqing patted Wang Kai's head and did not say anything. Her fingers were slightly cold. Wang Kai crawled out from Tian Xueqing's embrace. Its black eyes were filled with confusion. Master, how are we saved? Tian Xueqing patted its head. It was young Master Ji who saved us. Wang Kai, thank young Master Ji. Wang Kai then noticed the person in white clothes not far away. It suddenly felt that Yinhuang was more pleasing to the eye. However, its tone was still arrogant. I have decided not to hate you. After a long time, it said almost inaudibly, also, thank you. Yinhuang did not pay attention to it. He only looked at Tian Xueqing with a complicated gaze. His lips moved, and he took a deep breath. Tian Xueqing obviously did not want to talk to him anymore. All right, my master is still waiting for these herbs to save his life. Young Master Ji, we have already picked the flowers. Let's go back. Yinhuang. Okay. With a creak, the door was gently pushed open and a ray of sunlight jumped in. Yinhuang opened his eyes. The gentle sunlight shone on his face, and the white light around his body slowly dissipated. His eyes were still filled with displeasure from being disturbed. However, the moment he saw the person who came in, his displeasure dissipated like smoke. Tian Xueqing walked in. She was bathed in the brilliant sunlight. The golden light softened her face, making her expression somewhat blurry. Yinhuang's heart skipped a beat as he jumped up from the bed. Xueqing, you're here. She actually took the initiative to look for him. Tian Xueqing stopped in her tracks and looked away to avoid his surprised gaze. Yes. Without waiting for Yinhuang to say anything, she had already walked in front of him and went straight to the point. Young Master Ji, let's make a deal. A deal? Yinhuang felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over him. He looked at her for a moment and asked, what kind of deal? Tian Xueqing coughed softly and looked at him sincerely. My master has already taken the antidote, but the ice soul poison is extremely potent. In order to completely eradicate it, it requires a person with an extremely profound psyche power to circulate and force it out. How about this? If you help me cure my master, I'll write off all the money you owe me. The debt between us is cleared. Young Master G is a dragon among men. Surely you wouldn't be willing to stay here, right? It's better for you to leave as soon as possible. Presumably, Buddha Lotus Mountain also needs second master to go back and hold the fort. She said all the words that she had been thinking about for a long time without pausing, as if she was afraid of being interrupted. This time, Ji and Huang did not interrupt her. He did not even have the intention to open his mouth. There was a long silence. Chapter 2406. There was a long silence. Outside the window, the leaves rustled in the wind. There were unknown birds chirping on the branches, and the clear and melodious chirping of birds could be heard. The room was quiet, so quiet that she could hear her own heartbeat. Tian Xueqing suddenly became nervous and unconsciously clenched her sleeves. She stood in front of him, and her figure blocked most of the sunlight. Only a small amount of sunlight passed through and shone on his body. Ji and Huang lowered his eyes, and his eyelashes left a faint shadow under his eyelids. In this half-light and half-dark situation, his expression was somewhat unreal. She slightly turned her body, and more sunlight shone on his body. He seemed to be unaccustomed to the sudden sunlight, and slightly closed his eyes. Tian Xueqing suddenly realized that Ji and Huang's face was somewhat pale. She was about to say something, but he had already opened his eyes. The bright sunlight shone on his face, but it did not reach his eyes. His eyes were extremely dark, like a ball of thick ink that could not be melted without a trace of light. The pain disappeared in an instant, and it was so fast that Tian Xueqing thought that she was seeing things. He finally opened his mouth. His voice was somewhat low and hoarse, and he lightly said a word. Good. He smiled again and said good. His smile made Tian Xueqing's heart ache, but his word also made her sigh in relief. She ignored the indescribable pain in her heart. Her eyes lit up with joy. Good. Then come over in the afternoon. I will go and prepare first. You can continue meditating. I will not disturb you. Then she turned around and walked out. The door opened with a creak and then suddenly closed. The sunlight was blocked outside. Ji and Huang opened his eyes and smiled bitterly. Meditating required a calm mind. If he meditated now, he was afraid that he would suffer from qi deviation in a quiet room. Tian Xueqing looked at the two people sitting on the wooden bed, and her eyes could not hide her nervousness. Mo, who was wearing a green robe, sat in front of her. His body was surrounded by a white light, and as the white light became stronger, his pale face slowly improved. Blue ice crystals continuously fell from his fingertips. Ji and Huang was dressed in a white robe with complicated dark patterns embroidered with silver thread. The silver patterns flickered as the white light in his palm flickered. His eyes were slightly closed, and his handsome face was slightly pale. He placed his palm on Ji-Mo's back, and a white light surged. More and more ice crystals fell from Ji-Mo's fingertips. The ice crystals piled up together, emitting traces of coldness. It was clearly the dog days of summer, but the room was as cold as an ice house. Gradually, the number of ice crystals decreased, and Ji-Mo's complexion became much rosier. Ji and Huang's complexion became paler and paler, but the white light in his palm became more and more intense until it was almost blinding. It wasn't until Ji-Mo's fingertips could no longer force out half of the ice crystals that he slowly stopped. He exhaled and opened his eyes, which were filled with unconcealable exhaustion. I'm done. Tian Xueqing ran over, but not to him. Instead, she ran to Ji-Mo. Her little hand reached out to feel Ji-Mo's pulse and felt his pulse. Her little face was full of joy, and she smiled happily and contentedly. Master, the poison in your body has been completely removed. Ji-Mo's complexion was rosy, and he replied with a smile, It's all thanks to Xueqing and young Master Ji. He turned around and cupped his hands towards Ji and Huang. Young Master Ji's life-saving grace. I will definitely repay you in the future. Xueqing, thank young Master Ji for me. Chapter 2407. Tian Xueqing was stunned for a moment. She lowered her eyes and then looked at Ji Yun Huang with sincerity. Thank you, young Master Ji, for saving my master. The debt between us is written off. She was really thinking about writing off the debt with him at all times. How could she know that the debt between them was so complicated that it could never be written off? Ji Yun Huang slowly looked at her. After a long time, he said something with an indiscernible voice. You're too polite. Tian Xueqing was speechless. Ji Yun Huang slowly walked down. His body suddenly swayed for a moment before he steadied himself. However, his face was even paler than before. It was almost the same color as the robe he was wearing. Tian Xueqing felt that her heart had also swayed. She couldn't help but walk in front of him. Are you all right? She reached out her hand to check on him. However, Ji Yun Huang calmly avoided her hand. His tone was indifferent. I'm fine. Tian Xueqing looked at her empty palm. Her heart felt a little empty. She calmly retracted her hand. Then you should rest well. Ji Yun Huang coldly nodded his head and slowly walked out. When he reached the door, his body swayed again. Fortunately, he held onto the door frame in time to stabilize himself. His face was even paler, and he was sweating profusely. Tian Xueqing's heart twitched. She said dryly, Be careful. Ji Yun Huang turned a deaf ear to her words and walked away step by step. His silhouette was somewhat bleak and desolate, and the dark patterns on his white robe were much dimmer. Tian Xueqing looked at his silhouette and felt as if a huge rock was pressing down on her heart. Xueqing, young Master Ji is not feeling well. Go and take care of him. Jimo's voice sounded from behind her. Tian Xueqing hesitated for a moment. She turned her head and seemed to be hesitating. Jimo smiled. Don't worry. Master's poison has been cured. You should take good care of young Master Ji. Tian Xueqing nodded. Then, Master, you should rest well. Disciple will leave first. She hurriedly walked out. Jimo looked at Tian Xueqing's hurry back. A trace of deep thought flashed through his eyes. In his impression, even if the sky fell, this disciple of his would be calm and unhurried. When had she ever been so hurried? Ji Yun Huang's sleeves fluttered in the wind as he slowly walked along the winding corridor. The scenery on both sides of the corridor served as a foil for him. His face was pale, and his lips were almost bloodless. His white robes fluttered in the wind, and he looked as if he would fly away with the wind at any moment. Tian Xueqing caught up with him. Looking at his back, she pursed her lips. There was a faint aura of indifference and nobility around him. She felt like she was being ostracized. Just as Ji Yun Huang was about to walk out of the corridor, she quickly stepped forward to support him. So cold. It was so cold that Tian Xueqing almost flung her hand away. However, she placed her entire palm on his arm, and the chill spread through her palm. It didn't feel like a human arm, but more like an icicle. Something was wrong. His body temperature was too low. A normal person wouldn't be so cold. Almost reflexively, she reached for his pulse, wanting to find out what was wrong with him. Her speed was very fast, but Ji Yun Huang's speed was even faster. He silently avoided her hand once again. He seemed to be avoiding her touch. Tian Xueqing was stunned for a moment. She suddenly felt very uncomfortable. However, treating the patient was the most important thing right now. She suppressed the uneasiness in her heart and explained in a low voice, You are very strange right now. I will only know the specific situation after I check your pulse. Chapter 24:08. Ji Yun Huang glanced at her indifferently, with a complicated look in his eyes. His tone carried a hint of alienation. No need. I know my injuries very well. Moreover, we are even now, aren't we? If she came to care for him because of guilt, sympathy, or because of another man's orders, it was better not to come. Tian Xueqing suddenly felt a dull pain in her heart. It was as if her heart had been ruthlessly squeezed by someone. His indifference hurt her. She looked away, pursed her lips, and tried to explain. I'm a doctor. Ji Yun Huang flicked his sleeve, and her hand fell from his arm. Without looking at her, he continued to walk forward. Tian Xueqing looked down at her own hand, and her eyes suddenly felt a little sour. The temperature of her palm slowly returned to normal, but her heart felt a little lost. Just now, was she really too much? He must have used a lot of psychokinesis to help her master expel the poison. Otherwise, his face would not be so pale. Yet, she secretly chased him away. She did not know why, but she wanted to chase him away. She did not want him to stay here any longer, as if he was a scourge. However, chasing him away at that time was indeed a little too much. Wrong. Since she made a mistake, she had to correct it. Tian Shiweching raised her eyes and ran forward to catch up with Ji Yinhuang. Before he could react, she held his arm, not allowing him to refuse. "You are still my patient. You have to listen to me." Her tone was somewhat childish and arrogant. Ji Yinhuang's body stiffened, and he looked down at her without saying a word. Tian Shiweching's face was tense. She tried to make herself look less nervous, but the weakness in her eyes could not help but reveal itself. Ji Yinhuang's eyes moved, and he turned his head to look at the clouds in the distance. He did not brush her hand away. Tian Shiweching saw that he turned his head away and ignored her, and her eyes were slightly disappointed. After an unknown period of time, he sighed and finally compromised. "Send me back to Jinx Sinuan first." Tian Shiweching's eyes lit up, and she followed him back. On the way back, Ji Yinhuang was somewhat restless. He looked at Tian Shiweching, who was supporting him, and his heart was filled with complex feelings. He did not know what to think. "What happened? Why is there ice soul poison in your body?" Tian Shiweching's voice sounded, and it was filled with anger that she did not understand. Ji Yinhuang lay on the bed with his eyes closed. Tian Shiweching looked at him and felt even angrier. She didn't know why she was so angry. "Don't you know the reason?" Ji Yinhuang opened his eyes and suddenly asked an irrelevant question. "Do you care?" Tian Shiweching was confused by the question and subconsciously said, "Of course I care." "Did you get poisoned when you were helping Master force out the poison?" Was that why she cared if he was poisoned or not? Ji Yinhuang felt as if he had stepped on air. His chest felt stuffy, so he simply closed his eyes and ignored her. He needed some time to think about his next step. Tian Shiweching pursed her lips. She didn't know how she had offended him again, so she didn't say anything and directly gave him acupuncture. "I have already suppressed the poison in your body. You should rest well." Tian Shiweching pulled out the needle and turned to leave. The moment she stood up, she was suddenly pulled back by a strong force. Caught off guard, she fell to the side of the bed, and her upper body fell onto Ji Yinhuang's body. Chapter 2409. There was still a faint smell of medicine on his body, which mixed with his original cold body fragrance. It was indescribably pleasant. Tian Shiweching wanted to get up in a flurry, but was held in his embrace. She raised her head and angrily glared at him. "Let go of me." Ji Yinhuang's face was still pale, and his dark eyes looked straight into her heart. "Where are you going?" The smell of his body was overwhelming, causing Tian Shiweching to be both flustered and angry. She suddenly pushed him away. "It's none of your business." Her push was a little heavy, causing him to roll on the bed. Naturally, he let go of her. Tian Shiweching jumped up. After all, she was still a teenage girl and was inexperienced. His hug just now was extremely aggressive, causing her heart to beat like thunder even though she pushed him away. She lowered her sleeves and held a poison needle between her fingers. Just as she was about to stab him, she coldly said, "If you dare to take advantage of me again, I will cripple you." This sentence was full of threat. Ji Yinhuang lay there, slightly gasping for breath, but his gaze was fixed on her. "Can you bear to—" Tian Shiweching was speechless. If it was another man who did such a thing and said such a sentence, Tian Shiweching would probably stab him without a second thought. What was there to be reluctant about? He was not anyone to her. He was only her patient and servant. No, now that he had paid off his debt to her, he was not even a servant anymore. She twirled the silver needle in her hand and snorted. "Seeing that you saved my master's life, I will let you off for now. I will not fuss over your rudeness this time, but if there's a next time, what will happen if there's a next time?" Ji Yinhuang simply propped himself up with one arm. Tian Shiweching's small face tensed up. "I will definitely make you beg for death." Ji Yinhuang slightly closed his eyes and lay on the bed again. He seemed to be sighing and calm at the same time. I've already begged for death. He lay there with his long eyelashes drooping. Because of his injuries, his face was extremely pale, giving him a kind of fragile and dejected beauty. Tian Xueqing's heart felt as if it was pierced by something. This kind of him gave her a faint feeling of familiarity, as if she had seen him like this many years ago. She turned around and quickly left. She left just like that? As Ji Yunhuang lay there, a sense of helplessness rose in his heart. It seemed that no matter what he did, he could not enter her heart. She was always guarded against him. Jimo's poison was actually very complicated. Using medicine alone to expel the poison was not enough to cure it. Someone had to suck out the eye-soul root, and once the eye-soul root was sucked out, it had to enter the body. This time, in order to heal Jimo's injuries, he had consumed more than half of his psychokinesis. Moreover, he had also drawn the ice-soul poison into his body. However, he had relied on his profound psychokinesis and good physical foundation to suppress it. Now that he had relaxed, he felt as if an icy thread was swimming in his body. Wherever it went, he felt as if it was about to freeze. This icy soul frost poison was indeed powerful. No wonder that GMO was almost frozen into an ice sculpture. In order to completely expel the remaining ice soul poison from his body, he would have to pluck the netherworld flower again. The place where the netherworld flower grew was very dangerous. He did not want Tian Xueqing to take any more risks, so he could only rest up and do it himself. He began to circulate his martial arts, wanting to use his superior martial arts to force the poison to a certain place. Just as he closed his eyes, the door was pushed open with a bang. His body shook and he opened his eyes. When he saw the person who had come in, his pupils slightly shrank. The person who had come in was Tian Xueqing. Chapter 24:10. The person who came in was Tian Xueqing. She seemed to have rushed over in a hurry. In her hands was a brocade robe that was folded neatly. It was obvious that it had been washed. This was the brocade robe that she had confiscated from him. That brocade robe was actually a magic robe. Not only was it made of rare materials, it was also enchanted with a protective spell. Normally, it would not be dirty. Occasionally, it would be stained with a bit of dust. Tian Xueqing did not know the value of this robe. Even if it was worth 10,000 taels of gold, it would still be difficult to buy it. This is the robe I gave you. You don't have to be my servant anymore. Tian Xueqing said as soon as she opened her mouth. Ji Yunhuang's expression slightly changed. Was she trying to chase him away by giving him back the robe? He was still injured, and she was already so impatient. His heart seemed to have been stabbed by a knife. He slowly sat up and stared at her without saying a word. Tian Xueqing was frightened by his gaze. She could not remember what she was going to say after that. She placed the robe beside him and said, "You can check if your robe is damaged." Before she could finish her sentence, her wrist was suddenly grabbed. She felt dizzy, and her whole body was pulled onto the bed. She was pressed under his body. His body temperature was very strange. It was half cold and half hot. He was pressing on her petite body, trapping her. "Xueqing, do you want me to leave so badly? Do you know that I—" His eyes were burning and his hot breath blew on her cheeks, making Tian Xueqing's whole body freeze. Even if she did not know the ways of the world, she was still a young girl who was about to reach marriageable age. She was about to fall in love. Being bullied by a grown man like this, her head exploded and her heart beat like a drum. For a moment, she forgot to react. She was right in his arms. The person he had been looking for 100 years was right in his arms. The scene of them being intimate 100 years ago flashed in his mind. His heart was stirred. "Xueqing," he lowered his head and kissed her. Their lips touched, and a hot and familiar breath instantly enveloped Tian Xueqing. She was about to regain her senses, but the moment he forcefully opened her mouth, she was instantly sent flying, their lips intertwined, their tongues intertwined. Her breath was sweet and beautiful, making him unable to control himself once he kissed her. He held her tightly in his arms, and his arms tightened uncontrollably. He wished he could pull her into his body and make her a part of him. From now on, they would never be separated. No matter what happened, they would never be able to be separated. Although he had been intimate with her countless times 100 years ago, he had no choice but to do so in order to get rid of the poison. Therefore, even though they had done the most intimate thing between a man and a woman, he had never kissed her, not even when it was the most intense. This was the first time he had kissed her wholeheartedly, and 100 years had passed in between. Shueqing, Shueqing. His kiss was like a hurricane that engulfed her entire body, making it hard for her to breathe. The closer she got to him, the more familiar and dangerous his aura became. She couldn't think straight. Something seemed to snap in his head, leaving behind only a rumbling sound. The intense kiss seemed to have ignited the passion that had been dormant for 100 years. Ji Yanhuang's mind was in a daze. He hugged and kissed the person in his arms, and his hands could not help but wander around her body, as if he wanted to make up for the intimacy he owed her 100 years ago. Shueqing, Shueqing, I've been looking for you so hard, he murmured beside her lips. Tian Shueqing suddenly froze, and all her senses came back. Chapter 24:11. Pa! A clear and resounding slap resounded. Ji Yanhuang was in a daze and did not expect Tian Shueqing to slap him. This slap landed squarely on his face. Although Tian Shueqing's martial arts were not high, she was still very strong. Ji Yanhuang's body tilted from the slap and rolled to the side. Tian Shueqing scrambled to get out from under him and jumped to the ground. Her face was ashen and her heart was beating wildly, as if it was going to jump out of her throat. Ji Yanhuang, you bastard. In the end, she was still young. Although she was extremely angry to the point that her whole body was trembling, she could only curse out one sentence. There was an indescribable bitterness rolling in his chest. What did he think of her as? Did he look for her for a long time? Did he think of her as someone else? Ever since this person came here, her peaceful life had been disrupted, and she had a strange feeling. She had never felt so confused before. She tightly gripped the poison needle in her hand, as if it was her only support. She coldly said, Ji Yanhuang, I already said that if you take advantage of me again, I will cripple you. The poison needle was about to shoot out. After she finished her threat, she realized that Ji Yanhuang, who had been slapped to the side, did not move at all. Don't pretend to be dead. It's useless. Tian Shueqing angrily said. Ji Yanhuang still did not move. Tian Shueqing started to panic. He couldn't have fainted, right? It shouldn't be. This person was so strong. How could he be knocked unconscious by her slap? He must be faking it. Although she was so sure, her heart was still flustered. She wanted to go forward and check, but she did not dare to. Just at this moment, little pig Wankai came in. Tian Shueqing let it go to the bed to check. Wankai was not afraid of Ji Yanhuang. Its round little body directly jumped onto the bed. Its little pig nose sniffed Ji Yanhuang's face and reported, Master, he is dead. Bang! Tian Shueqing's mind seemed to explode. Dead. How could it be? She had only slapped him once, that's all. Could it be that her slap had coincidentally landed on his temple? She directly rushed over and touched his body with her fingers. Her heart was as cold as his body temperature. His body was ice cold, colder than a dead person. She flipped him over. His eyes were tightly shut, and there was a clear palm print on his snow-white cheek. It was a ghastly sight. His thin lips were tightly pursed, and his lips were pale. She was, after all, a doctor. Although she was flustered, she did not panic. She first checked his breathing, then his neck and wrist. When she could not feel anything, her fingers trembled. She simply lay on his chest and listened to his heartbeat. His body was extremely cold, as if he was covered in a layer of ice in an instant. It made her tremble a little as she leaned against his chest. Is he dead? Is he dead? His body is so cold. He is not panting, and his heart is not beating, Wankai concluded. He must have been dead for a long time. Scram, Tian Shueqing said to Wankai. He still had a heartbeat, but it was very slow. It only beat once after a while. It was very weak, but it was very regular. His ice soul poison was acting up. However, This was the first time she had seen him in such a state since she started practicing medicine. Tian Shiweching was at a loss of what to do. She took out a needle and wanted to stab it into his hand to wake him up. Just as the needle was about to touch his skin, he suddenly flipped his wrist and held onto her little hand. His corpse is coming back to life. Wang Kai let out a loud cry and immediately charged forward, aiming for Ji Yinhuang's arm. Master, run! Chapter 24:12. Before its small body could hit Ji Yinhuang, it was sent flying by a blue light. With a bang, it landed on the door and slid to the ground. Tian Shiweching only felt that the other party's hand was like an iron hoop, tightly wrapping around her slender wrist, causing her to be unable to move at all. Although his face was extremely pale, his tightly shut eyes had already opened. His black, jade-like pupils stared at her, and there seemed to be disbelief in his eyes. Shiweching, do you really want to poison me to death? His voice was extremely hoarse. I want to save you, Tian Shiweching blurted out. Ji Yinhuang's gaze shifted to the needle in her hand. Tian Shiweching also looked at it, and then she broke out in cold sweat. In her panic, she did not see clearly that the needle in her hand was not a life-saving silver needle, but an emerald green, poisonous needle. Tian Shiweching was born beautiful, but her martial arts were ordinary, so it was easy for some lechers to covet her. Therefore, in order to protect herself, she not only owned a little pig that could release electricity, but also learned how to use poisonous needles. There are different kinds of poisonous needles. Some could make people unconscious, some could make people lose their ability to resist, and of course, there were also the most poisonous ones that could take a person's life within a few seconds. The needle in her hand was the most poisonous kind. Once it pierced into a person's skin, that person would definitely kick the person's leg and die. I took the wrong one. I wanted to use the silver needle to wake you up, but you fainted just now. No, there is no heartbeat. Tian Shiweching explained in a mess. Ji Yinhuang's hand slightly loosened, and his eyes seemed to be flowing with light. Don't be afraid, I'm not dead. How could he, a cultivator, die so easily? Tian Shiweching finally withdrew her hand and hurriedly put away the poisonous needle again. When she looked at Ji Yinhuang again, her gaze was somewhat suspicious. Were you faking it just now? Ji Yinhuang slowly withdrew his hand. Look, do I look like I was faking it? His face was still pale, and his once light red lips were now devoid of color. Cold sweat flowed down his forehead, probably because of the chill poison in his body. The sweat that flowed out of his forehead condensed into ice crystals, making him look like a vampire that could not be exposed to light. This kind of appearance was naturally not something that could be faked. Tian Shiweching was a little regretful for her previous question. What happened to you just now? She didn't believe that she could knock him out with one slap. Ji Yinhuang closed his eyes slightly. Before Tian Shiweching had arrived, he had been circulating his energy to force the ice soul poison into his meridians. However, after her arrival, his emotions were in turmoil. At this time, he should have been recuperating, but Tian Shiweching had forced him to kiss her, causing his injuries to worsen. Tian Shiweching's palm strike was like the straw that broke the camel's back, causing the ice soul poison to erupt and rush towards his heart. Once a martial artist cultivated their martial arts to the extreme, their body would have an automatic protective mechanism. When the poison took effect, their body would automatically activate the protective mode, causing their entire body to enter a state of tortoiseshell. Their blood vessels would almost stop flowing, and naturally, their breathing and pulse would be completely absent, as if they were dead. After all, he was an immortal. Even though his body was in the state of tortoiseshell, his external senses were still extremely shocking. She used a poisonous needle to stab him, triggering his body's automatic protection skill once again. Only then did he manage to stop her murder at the critical moment. As for Piggy Wang Kai, he was also sent flying by his self-protection aura. Ji Yinhuang explained everything to Tian Shiweching in a few words. Tian Shiweching looked at him with a complicated gaze. It turned out that after becoming an immortal, one self-protection skill would be so powerful Chapter 24:13. After all, he was seriously injured to save her master. Seeing him like this, Tian Shueqing felt a little guilty. When she saw the clear palm print on his face, the guilt doubled. Ji Huang's gaze fell on her pale face and saw her guilt. His heart warmed. Don't be afraid. Tian Shueqing pursed her lips. I'm not afraid. You're the one dying, not me. Although she said this, her heart was still beating wildly. This person took advantage of her and stole her first kiss. Logically speaking, she should have stabbed him to death. But seeing him almost die just now, she actually panicked. Ji Huang seemed to have been stung by her words. His eyes darkened slightly, but he immediately chuckled. Neither of us wants to die. He then added another sentence in his heart. I'd rather die than let you die. Neither of them wanted to die. Whoever died would be an irreplaceable regret for both of them. He was obviously seriously injured, but his smile was alluring. The saying, a stranger is like jade, a gentleman is unparalleled in this world, probably referred to people like him. Her master, GMO, was a handsome man with a gentle temperament. This person's temperament was similar to her master's, but her master was not as beautiful and aggressive as him. He looked elegant and handsome, but his aura was extremely oppressive. He was like a peerless sword hidden in a scabbard, making people's hearts beat faster. Tian Shueqing suddenly shifted her gaze away from him and calmed herself down. She coldly said, Don't use your psychokinesis, or else you'll easily go berserk. I'll force the poison in your body to other places. Ji Huang looked at her for a moment, then smiled. Okay. Tian Shueqing heaved a sigh of relief and began to work beside him. Ji Huang slightly closed his eyes and sensed everything about her. Her fingers lightly touched his body, and her breath was beside him. She pierced a silver needle into his body, but he did not feel any pain. He only felt a slight itch and even a tingling sensation. The afternoon sun shone in. It was warm and quiet, and they could only hear each other's breathing. Even the pig did not dare to make a sound. It walked over with its cat-like steps and lay down beside him, watching with its round eyes. Tian Shueqing inserted the needles very quickly, but this kind of acupuncture technique also consumed a lot of energy. After a set of acupuncture techniques, her forehead was covered with sweat, but fortunately, she managed to control the ice soul poison in Ji Huang's body. She heaved a sigh of relief and stood up. Suddenly, she swayed and her vision went dark. Her body tilted and fell right onto Ji Huang's body. Ji Huang groaned, startling Tian Shueqing. She hurriedly struggled to get up, but her hand was pressed somewhere, causing Ji Huang to groan again. He grabbed her wrist and said, Don't move, dash. Just now, Tian Shueqing was too tired and had gotten up too hastily, which was why she blacked out for a moment. Now that she had recovered, she didn't dare to move when she heard Zhang Xian's voice. She looked at him nervously. His face was so pale that it was almost bloodless. How are you feeling? Tian Shueqing was struggling to maintain her half-lying position on him. Ji Huang slowly exhaled. His voice was hoarse due to his illness. I'm fine. Tian Shueqing was worried and wanted to check his pulse, but his face turned pale again. Don't move. Even this was not allowed. Tian Shueqing had some doubts in her heart, but she still did as she was told. She remained motionless in his embrace. Her face was buried in his embrace, so she could not see Ji Huang's slightly curved lips. Chapter 24:14. After a long while, her muffled voice was heard. Are you done? Ji Huang did not speak. Tian Shueqing slightly raised her head, and her small mouth happened to rub against his beautiful chin, causing her face to turn red again. Ji Huang suddenly got up. At this moment, he did not have much strength and naturally could not trap her, allowing her to easily escape. Tian Shueqing took 2 steps back, her heart still beating wildly. She wanted to say something, but her mind was in a mess and she did not know what to say. When she raised her head, she saw that Ji Huang's deep eyes were still locked on her body. Her heart was in an indescribable mess. What happened to her? Recently, she kept getting into trouble. When she was struggling just now, She had dropped the robe that she had returned to Ji Yin Huang. She bent over to pick it up and placed it on the side of his bed. Your clothes. You returned my clothes. Are you trying to chase me away? Ji Yin Huang asked. Tian Xueqing was stunned for a moment. She originally did not have this intention. She just felt that since Ji Yin Huang had already paid off his debt, there was no need to hold onto his robe. Now that she heard him ask this question, her heart was moved. She did not know why, but although he was very gentle to her and even helped her a lot, she was subconsciously afraid of him. It was as if she got too close to him, she would fall into a trap and never be able to climb out. She subconsciously wanted to stay away from him and let him go. Therefore, after pausing for a moment, she did not deny it. She lightly coughed and said, "The debt between me and young master has already been settled. Once young master's cold poison is completely removed, you can leave." She paused for a moment. Young master should rest well. I still have to visit master. Regarding young master's cold poison, Xueqing will think of a way. She turned around and was about to leave when Ji Yin Huang spoke. You don't need to think about my cold poison. I have my own reasons. These words sounded as if he was angry. Tian Xueqing's feet paused for a moment. That's good. Young master, please do as you wish. She turned around and left quickly without looking back. Ji Yin Huang slightly closed his eyes. She was still chasing him away. She was still thinking about her master. When she mentioned her master, her eyes shone brightly, causing him to feel dazzled, the familiar, suffocating pain in his heart. His body slightly swayed, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. I can't think about it anymore. Otherwise, he might really lose his life here. It wasn't easy for him to find her. He hadn't reconciled with her yet. So how could he just give up like this? He tried his best to clear his mind and began to meditate to expel the poison. 2 days passed. Time seemed both fast and slow. Just like that, 2 more days passed. In the past 2 days, the cold poison in Ji Yin Huang's body had gradually spread to one of his forearms. As long as he persevered for another 2 days, he would be able to expel the cold poison from the rest of his body. His martial arts would also recover by half, and he would be able to pick the netherworld flower. Perhaps it was because he had once told Tian Xueqing that he could treat his own injuries, so Tian Xueqing felt at ease and boldly left him alone. She had not appeared in front of him for the past 2 days. Only the pig came to him every day, morning or evening. However, the servants still delivered food to him on time, and the quality of the food was quite good. After Ji Yin Huang slightly controlled the poison, he would also go out for a walk. The quiet valley where Tian Xueqing lived was known as the Medical Valley in the outside world. Although the area wasn't large, there were mountains, rivers, lakes, and forests. The scenery of the lake and mountains was very elegant. Around the lake, there were a few small courtyards built in 2s and 3s. Chapter 24:15. A few small courtyards were built around the lake in 2s and 3s. Each courtyard had its own unique characteristics. It had a kind of tranquil rural atmosphere that could calm one's mind and dispel vulgar thoughts. From this point, it could be seen that GMO was not only a doctor, but also a refined scholar. There was an unwritten rule in the medical valley that all patients who came in for treatment, no matter how prominent their status was or how great their family background was, they would all be treated the same. Apart from those who were unconscious and unable to take care of themselves, they were not allowed to bring along any servants. The medical attendants in the medical valley were only in charge of changing the patient's medicine and delivering meals. They did not care about anything else. Even the rooms had to be cleaned up by the patients themselves, and their clothes had to be changed and washed by themselves. Therefore, Ji Yin Huang could occasionally see sloppily dressed young masters washing their clothes by the lake with endless resentment. This actually trained these people's ability to take care of themselves. There were men and women, old and young patients here. Ji Yin Huang already knew from a few days that there were 21 patients in the medical valley. In addition to the servants and Tian Xueqing and her master, there were no less than 30 people in the medical valley. The more people there were, the more gossip there would be. Therefore, Ji Yin Huang also heard some gossip when he was strolling by the lake. For example, The place that Ah Ching went to the most recently was GMO's nurturing garden. She would often accompany GMO to stroll by the lake to relax. For example, Ah Ching had taken in a new patient. That patient's condition did not seem serious, but Ah Ching went to that place the most frequently. When she was not accompanying her master, she spent almost all her time by that patient's side. Someone saw that the patient was a beautiful man. When he heard this gossip, Ji Yin Huang did not know what to feel. He stood by the lake and looked at the small building in the distance, lost in thought. In the past, he was number one in Tian Xueqing's heart. Now, he did not know where he was placed in her heart. Was this retribution? He slightly closed his eyes. Perhaps. Every dog has its day. Today, he also tasted the feeling of being completely ignored by his sweetheart. His white robe fluttered in the wind, and his figure looked lonely yet free and easy. He was once the most handsome man in vast sky country, and this title was definitely not undeserved. He also cultivated an immortal physique, so he naturally had a kind of magnificence that ordinary people could not reach. No matter where he stood, he would definitely become a scene that no one could ignore. Every time he came out, there would be a lot of people strolling by the lakeside, especially those women. Even if they were injured or sick, they would come out at this time to create a chance encounter. There were even some bold ones who would deliberately leave behind a handkerchief, a jade pendant, or a jade hairpin every time they brushed past him. She was hoping that he would help her pick it up and use this opportunity to strike up a conversation or two. However, they did not expect that Ji Yin Huang would turn a blind eye to all of this. His sleeves fluttered as he walked away, shattering the hearts of all the young girls. There was a kind of cold aura around him that made those who didn't like him dare to act rashly. At this moment, he stood by the lakeside and felt something in his heart. He casually took out an emerald green jade flute and played it. The sound of the flute leisurely floated around the lake and the mountains. The sound of the flute was extremely quiet, and when people heard it, they would forget their worries. Who knew how many people who heard it were stunned? A light laugh interrupted this tranquil harmony. A voice leisurely sounded. If you want to show off your elegance, go back home and show it off. What are you playing here for? Are you trying to attract someone's attention? Chapter 24:16. His voice was extremely clear, but the words he said were unavoidably harsh and full of provocation. When the sound of the flute stopped, Ji Yin Huang looked over and saw a man wearing a top-quality robe standing not far behind him. His appearance was top quality, and his clothes were top quality. His appearance was extremely beautiful, to the point that people could not tell if he was a man or a woman. Even if all the beauties present were added together, they would not be as delicate as him. The robe he was wearing was naturally of the highest quality. It was a deep purple color, and embroidered on the corner of the robe was a surging flood dragon baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. It was even more formidable than a dragon. However, his appearance gave people a very delicate feeling, as if he could be swayed by the wind. At this moment, he was looking at Ji Yin Huang with his head slightly tilted, like a proud little girl. His pair of big watery eyes were filled with disdain. It turned out to be a young marquis. Ji Yin Huang could guess his identity just by looking at the robe he was wearing. The youth looked to be around 17 or 18 years old. He should be the beautiful young master everyone was talking about. As expected, he was as beautiful as a painting. He looked like a woman dressed as a man, or a delicate beauty dressed as a man. However, the other party was a genuine man, and Ji Yin Huang could still see that. Ji Yin Huang's temperament was cold. Moreover, in the eyes of someone who had experienced the vicissitudes of life, this obviously provocative youth in front of him was still a child. He was too lazy to pay attention to him. He put away the flute and turned around to leave. Wait! The youth in the robe blocked his path. Ji Yin Huang had always disliked people getting close to him, so he took a step back. What's the matter? He was much taller than the other party. The youth standing in front of him was half a head shorter, so he naturally lost in terms of aura. The natural pressure emitted from Ji Yin Huang's body caused the brocade-robed youngster's heart to tremble, making him feel extremely uncomfortable. This youngster's appearance was weak, but his character was not weak at all. In fact, he was somewhat arrogant. He simply jumped onto a large rock at the side and looked down at Ji Yun Huang from above. He spoke bluntly. I heard that you were pursuing Ah Ching. Ji Yun Huang did not deny it. So what if I am? The youth in the robe raised his head and laughed. With just you? What kind of person is Miss Ah Ching? How can she be pursued by a nobody like you? This marquis advises you to give up on this idea. Otherwise, you won't have a good time. Ji Yun Huang lightly glanced at him. He was too lazy to say anything to him, so he turned around and walked past him. The brocade-robed youth was completely ignored by Ji Yun Huang, and he became even angrier in his heart. He raised his palm and slapped it towards Ji Yun Huang. You dare to ignore this marquis's words. This weak-looking youth's martial arts were not weak at all. Every time he made a move, there would be a sharp gust of wind. If Ji Yun Huang was hit by this attack, he would definitely be sent flying. Ji Yun Huang furrowed his brows slightly. He had never thought that this youth would have such a fiery temper. If he wanted to make a move, he would make a move. He was simply like a spoiled little tyrant. Although he still couldn't use his telekinesis, his combat experience and skills made it so that even 100 young marquises wouldn't be his match. He tilted his body slightly and dodged the youth's palm. Splash! The young man fell into the water, creating a huge splash. The young man knew how to swim. He quickly came out and shouted angrily, Rebel! It was a rebellion. You actually dared to attack me. This marquis will definitely tear you to shreds. My grandfather is the regent of the vast sky empire. Ji Yun Huang frowned slightly. This child was Ji Yun Tian's grandson. Ji Yun Tian was Ji Yun Huang's youngest brother. Chapter 24:17. Ji Yun Tian was Ji Yun Huang's youngest brother. When Ji Yun Huang was in trouble, Ji Yun Tian was still a baby. In the blink of an eye, his grandson had already grown up. The current emperor sitting on the dragon throne was the youngest son of the sixth prince, Ji Yun Hao. This kid was not very promising and had a weak body, causing the imperial power to fall to someone else. The one who truly held the power now was Ji Yun Tian, the regent. No wonder his grandson dared to be so arrogant. Although Ji Yun Huang was not interested in imperial power, it did not mean that he did not know what happened in Chong Kong Empire. Furthermore, Ji Yun Tian had repeatedly extended an olive branch to him recently. He went to Buddha Lotus Mountain several times to invite him to become the imperial tutor. He even had thoughts of pushing him onto the throne. Unfortunately, Ji Yun Huang was not interested in imperial power at all and turned a blind eye to the olive branch extended by the regent at this moment. The young duke had already jumped onto the shore and aggressively blocked Ji Yun Huang's path. Then, with a shake of his hand, a 7-colored flower flag flew into the sky and exploded in the air. It was obvious that he was summoning his subordinates or helpers from outside the valley. The surrounding people who were originally watching the show kept quiet out of fear. Everyone knew that this young duke had a prominent status and was not someone the people of Chong Kong Empire could afford to offend. But now this young master had actually thrown the young duke into the water. This time, they were afraid that they would be in big trouble. Although this young master was well-dressed and handsome, he should not have any power or influence. Otherwise, he would not have become a servant here for a few days just for 1,000 taels of silver. Some people wanted to remind Ji Yun Huang to seek help from Miss Ah Ching as soon as possible because the young duke still gave her face here. But Ji Yun Huang was standing face to face with the young duke, so no one dared to say such words. There were still a few people who could not help but speak up, telling Ji Yun Huang to quickly apologize to the young duke and beg for his forgiveness so that the matter would not be blown out of proportion. There were different opinions, but these people were also doing it for the good of Ji Yun Huang. After all, they were all in the medical valley, and no one wanted to blow things up, but Ji Yun Huang turned a deaf ear to them. He did not even bother to look at the young duke who was blocking his path and pushed him to the side. A gentleman does not block the way. Please excuse me. The young duke staggered because of him and was furious. He once again threw a punch. This child doesn't have a good memory. Ji Yun Huang raised his sleeve and wrapped it around his wrist. Following the force of his fist, the young duke once again fell into the water with a plop. What's going on? What are you arguing about? A clear voice came from not far away. Ji and Huang's body stiffened slightly as he looked in the direction of the voice. His eyes narrowed slightly. Tian Xueqing and Ji Mo walked side by side. One of Tian Xueqing's arms was still in the crook of Ji Mo's arm. Her dress fluttered in the wind. Walking together with Ji Mo, who was wearing a white robe, they looked like a perfect couple. Tian Xueqing's gaze swept past Ji Yunhuang's body and landed on the young Marquis, who was struggling in the lake. She frowned slightly. Huan Yu, with your illness, you can't soak in water. Why did you run into the lake? As he spoke, he ran up and pulled the young Marquis back onto the shore. This time, the young Marquis had lost a lot of face. His originally pale face was now completely red, and the hand he used to point at Ji Yunhuang trembled. You wait. I will tear you to shreds. This one will wait. Ji Yunhuang lightly threw out these words and turned to leave. He had not seen her for 3 days, and he was still seriously ill. But at this moment, she did not say any words of concern, nor did she have a worried expression. She only glanced at him, and that glance was as if she was looking at an ordinary patient. Chapter 24:18. They had not seen each other for 3 days, but she did not say any words of concern, nor did she look at him with worried eyes. She only glanced at him as if she was looking at an ordinary patient, and she was so close to her master. He felt as if his heart had been stabbed by a knife. His emotions were unstable, and the cold poison in his blood surged again. He must return to his room to meditate. A conversation came from behind him. Huan Yu, what's going on? Why did you have a conflict with this young Master Ji? Ah Qing, I'm fighting for you. This toad wants to eat swan meat, and he actually wants to scheme against you. I want to teach him a lesson. You can only be my little uncles. How can he be worthy? Huan Yu, don't mess around. Ah Qing and I are master and disciple. This was Ji Mo's voice. What's wrong with master and disciple? As long as both sides are in love, there's no problem at all. Little uncle, you and Ah Qing are a match made in heaven. I don't want anyone to break you two apart. Ji Huan Yu was indignant. Ah Qing, you also like my little uncle, right? Don't deny it. I can see it from your eyes. Don't worry, I'll help you. I think you're the only one worthy of my little uncle. The young Marquis's tone was firm and arrogant. Ji Yunhuang's feet were tripped by something, and he staggered, but he immediately stood firm and continued walking. So GMO was the young Marquis's uncle. No wonder Ah Qing looked at him so highly. Love the house, love the crow. From start to finish, he did not hear Tian Xueqing refute Ji Huan Yu. It was obvious that she had silently agreed with Ji Huan Yu's words, although he had some suspicions about the relationship between Tian Xueqing and her master. It had not been verified. But now it was confirmed. In this life, she had another sweetheart, and this sweetheart was her master. He no longer had any place in her heart. What should he do? Let her and GMO withdraw from the relationship? But he had searched for her for 100 years. His mind was in a daze, and his blood surged even faster. There was a sweet taste in his throat. He must immediately return to his room to cultivate. Marquis, Marquis. The sound of clothes fluttering in the wind came from all directions. 8 people flew over from 8 different directions and landed in front of Ji Huan Yu. They saluted Ji Huan Yu together. These people were the imperial bodyguards who protected Ji Huan Yu. Each of them was skilled. They usually stayed outside the medical valley and would only appear when they received a signal. When Ji Huan Yu saw them, he stomped his foot and pointed at Ji Yunhuang, who had already walked away. Take him down. This person dares to offend this Marquis. He even dared to tease Miss Ah Qing. The 8 men received the order and immediately surrounded him. GMO frowned. Huan Yu, don't mess around. This person is, before he could finish his words, he was interrupted by Ji Huan Yu. Little uncle, you don't have to care. I must teach him a lesson today. Stop, stop. The 8 guards moved as fast as lightning and rushed over together. These 8 people moved swiftly and caught up with Ji Yunhuang in the blink of an eye. They surrounded Ji Yunhuang and said, You dare to leave after offending the young duke? Ah, Imperial Uncle G. He's Imperial Uncle G. 2 of the 8 people blurted out and then knelt down with a plop. We pay our respects to Imperial Uncle. The other 6 people did not know what was going on, but when they saw their leader and deputy leader kneel down, they naturally knelt down as well. For a moment, they did not know which Imperial Uncle Ji Huang was. Ji Huang, he was stunned. Chapter 24:19. At this moment, GMO finally said what he wanted to say. This is Ji Yun Huang, the second master of Buddha Lotus Mountain. Huan Yu, you should call him Imperial Granduncle. Ji Huan Yu. He was dumbfounded. Everyone's mouth formed an O shape. Ji Yun Huang's story had spread far and wide. 8 out of 10 people present had heard of his story. They heard that he had abandoned the throne for the crown princess and wandered around the Tian-Ci continent. They also heard that he had become an immortal and became a legend in the Tian-Ci continent when no one was optimistic about him. Now, this legendary figure had appeared in front of them. How could they not be shocked? Everyone was shocked and did not dare to speak. It was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. A question floated in everyone's mind. Since Ji Yun Huang's background was so big, why would he become a servant here for a mere 1,000 taels of silver? What was he doing this for? Thinking about the conversation between Ji Yun Huang and Ji Huan Yu, Ji Yun Huang obviously had feelings for this Miss Ah Ching, and he did not deny it. Could it be that this Miss Ah Ching looked very similar to the crown princess who died 100 years ago? Everyone looked at Ji Yun Huang and then at Tian Xueqing. Their eyes were filled with gossip. Ji Yun Huang slowly turned around and swept his eyes over the 8 people. Finally, his eyes landed on the 2 Imperial guards who were kneeling first. You recognize me? These 2 Imperial guards were also considered outer disciples of Buddha Lotus Mountain. According to seniority, these 2 Imperial guards should call Ji Yun Huang Martial Granduncle. The 2 of them immediately said respectfully, replying to Martial Granduncle. This disciple was fortunate enough to see Martial Granduncle's immortal face at the gathering of outer disciples 5 years ago. Ji Yun Huang did not say anything. 5 years ago, he only showed his face once at the gathering and then left. He did not expect them to remember him. This was simply like a flood rushing against the Dragon King's temple. They did not recognize each other anymore. Ji Huan Yu finally woke up and unwillingly came forward to pay his respects to this Imperial Granduncle. After paying his respects, before he stood up, he asked a very sharp question. Imperial Granduncle, you said that you were interested in Miss Ah Ching because she looks like the crown princess? Ji Yun Huang was stunned, and his gaze once again fell on Tian Xueqing's face. Tian Xueqing's pretty face was pale. She pursed her lips and looked at him. Although her expression didn't change, she couldn't help but hold her breath. Her fingers were still unconsciously wrapped around Ji Mo's arm. When she met Ji Yun Huang's gaze, she quietly leaned against her master's body, as if she was seeking protection. Ji Yun Huang felt as if a sharp needle had pierced his heart. Before he could say anything, the sound of clothes fluttering in the wind could be heard again. Master! 4 figures flashed through the air and landed in front of Ji Yun Huang. They immediately knelt down and said, Master, your subordinates are late. Everyone's eyes widened. The 4 of them were quadruplets and looked very similar. 2 girls and 2 boys, wearing the same color and style of robes. All of their movements were synchronized without the slightest difference. The 4 of them knelt on the ground like 4 neat little white poplars. They were all the same height and were extremely eye-catching. Ji Huan Yu sucked in a breath of cold air. Beautiful jade, 4 azuras. The 4 of them looked like they were in their 20s. They were extremely beautiful, and when they stood together, they were like pearls and jade. The 4 siblings' martial arts were extremely high, and they became famous very early. 50 years ago, they were already famous in Tianxi and had always appeared and disappeared mysteriously. Chapter 24:20. The 4 of them were highly skilled in martial arts and had made a name for themselves very early on. 50 years ago, they became famous and had always been elusive. At that time, Jianhao offered a large sum of money to hire the four of them as the imperial guards. He even personally visited them, but was rejected by the four of them. The four of them were carefree and unfettered. It could be said that they did not obey anyone. Who would have thought that they would actually recognize Ji Yunhuang as their master? The martial arts of the four of them could easily throw Ji Huanyu's 8 bodyguards to the ground. Master, it's our fault for not protecting you properly and causing you to be injured. Please punish us. The four of them spoke at the same time and closed their mouths at the same time. Ji Yunhuang waved his hand. I didn't allow you to follow me. I don't blame you. Get up. The four of them stood up together. What was even rarer was that the four of them were of the same height. If not for the fact that there were men and women, everyone would have thought that they were the same person's clones. The four of them surrounded Ji Yunhuang in the middle and faintly separated everyone, not allowing anyone to come forward. One of them took out a token and flashed it. Imperial decree. Everyone who sees Imperial Uncle is the same as seeing Emperor himself. Who would kneel down when seeing the Emperor? The onlookers hurriedly kowtowed towards Ji Yunhuang, and the entire lakeside knelt down. Even Ji Huanyu, the young marquis, unwillingly kowtowed again. Tian Shiweqing frowned slightly. According to the Medical Valley's rules, there is no distinction between nobility and lowly. Even the arrogant Ji Huanyu could only be obedient here and did not dare to cause trouble. If he did, he would be sent out by her. Just now, when she saw Ji Huanyu being aggressive towards Ji Yunhuang, she subconsciously felt disgusted. She was about to stop him when this series of events happened. She raised her head and looked at Ji Yunhuang, who was standing nearby. She faintly felt that he was a little far away from her. She pursed her lips and could not help but lean towards her master. She had always liked her master. Her master should be the person she relied on in this life. She did not like to be disturbed by others. She liked a peaceful life, but this imperial uncle was like the ocean, an unpredictable ocean that seemed to be able to swallow her whole. So she had to stay far away from him. Once she was done treating his injuries, she wanted him to quickly leave and stay away from her life. She wanted him to stop disturbing her peaceful life. The light in Ji Yunhuang's eyes dimmed slightly. The blood and qi in his chest were surging violently, and the ice soul poison in his arm was beginning to stir. Once it spread, even the gods would not be able to save him. He wanted to turn around and leave, but as soon as his foot moved, his vision turned black and his body swayed. Master! The two males of the quadruplets supported Ji Yunhuang from both sides. As soon as they helped Ji Yunhuang up, they realized that something was wrong. It was clearly the beginning of summer, but their master's body was as cold as ice. Master, you're poisoned. Who did it? The gazes of the quadruplets all shot towards Ji Huanyu. Ji Huanyu felt a chill in his heart and subconsciously took a step back. It wasn't me. He was poisoned long ago. It has nothing to do with them. Ji Yunhuang barely managed to spit out a few words. His entire body was ice cold, but the blood in his throat was surging. The poison is about to act up. Tian Shiweqing had already rushed over and reached out her hand to check his pulse. Unexpectedly, Ji Yunhuang took a step back and ignored her. He only instructed the 4 subordinates, "Send me back to my room. I could suppress it myself." Tian Shiweqing's fingers touched nothing but air. She then watched as the 4 men quickly supported Ji Yunhuang into his room. Chapter 24-21. She pursed her lips tightly. Her heart felt like it was wrapped in ice, but it also felt like it was burning. She couldn't tell what kind of feeling it was. She stood there for a moment and suddenly took a deep breath. She said in a low voice, "Master, I'm going to see him." Then she ran towards Ji Yunhuang's room. GMO stood there, and his eyes flashed with a trace of deep thought. Ji Huanyu was still on his little uncle's side. He hurriedly pushed him. "Little uncle, you should also go take a look. Don't let your wife run away." GMO frowned. "What nonsense are you talking about? She is my disciple. I'm older than her by a whole generation. Imperial granduncle is older than her by 100 years. Didn't he still chase after her? Little uncle, if you don't hurry up, I'm afraid it will really be too late. Jimo's heart was in a mess, but she is still young. Ji Huanyu immediately said, she's not young anymore. She's almost 15. In another half a month, it will be her coming-of-age ceremony, right? After that, she will be able to marry. Little uncle, she and you are a match made in heaven. You can't miss this opportunity. Someone else has taken the initiative. Imperial Granduncle took a fancy to her, perhaps because her name is the same as Imperial Granduncle's wife, or perhaps because her appearance is similar. Imperial Granduncle took her as a substitute. Can you bear to see her being taken as a substitute? GMO took a step back and narrowed his eyes. Qing was a treasure that he had personally raised. He naturally didn't want her to suffer any grievances. Imperial Uncle Ji had suffered from the ice soul poison because of him. If he couldn't cure him in time, he was afraid that his little disciple's heart would never be able to let go. Let me in. I'm a doctor here. I can treat him. Otherwise, he will be poisoned very quickly. Tian Xueqing was blocked by the quadruplets at the door because Ji Yinhuang had ordered that no one was allowed to disturb him. Tian Xueqing was anxious to know the extent of Ji Yinhuang's injuries, but these two women were like door gods, not letting her in. She could only argue with them. Piggy Wong Kai was also indignant at the side. Hey, this is our master's territory. My master can go wherever he wants. What qualifications do you have to stop him? Don't you know that non-patients are not allowed to enter this valley? Even young Marquis Ji was no exception. Every time he came, his subordinates would obediently wait outside the valley. So what if your master is the imperial uncle? So what if he doesn't abide by the rules of the medical valley? Let her in. The four of you can leave the valley. Ji Yinhuang's voice suddenly came from inside the house. Although his voice was weak and hoarse, his tone was firm. The four of them hesitated for a moment. Master, your injuries are so serious. You need someone to serve you? No need. I just need to control the poison. You can leave now. Don't make me say it again. Since he had said so, the four of them could not disobey. They could only bow and leave the valley. Piggy Wonkai was worried and followed behind them to supervise them. Wonkai looked cute, and all girls like cute things. The two girls among the quadruplets couldn't help but tease it. Your name is Wonkai? So what? Wonkai raised its nose. Your master gave you a good name. It's rare to see a little pig that is so smart and can even speak human language. Another woman sighed. What piggy? I am Wentian, divine beast Wentian. Wonkai was angry. The four of them naturally did not care about the anger of a little pig. Chapter 24-22. Wong Kai, do you know how my master was poisoned by the ice soul poison? Wong Kai snorted. My master was poisoned by the ice soul poison. In order to repay the debt, your master helped to cure my master, but in the end, your master was poisoned. Wong Kai's words about your master and my master did not confuse anyone, but the quadruplets were somewhat surprised. Repay the debt? Repay what debt? At that time, your master was injured by the cloud-swallowing beast and was on the verge of death. My master saved him and gave him a lot of expensive medicine, which amounted to a total of 1,000 taels of silver. Your master was extremely poor and could not afford to repay the debt, so he expressed his willingness to sell himself as a servant to repay the debt. He only worked as a servant for a few days and did not make him do any physical work. Later, when my master was poisoned and came back, he cured my master of the poison, so my master magnanimously repaid him 1,000 taels of silver. The debt between the two of them was written off. Although Wong Kai's words were incoherent, the quadruplets still understood, and their faces were filled with disbelief. Selling himself for a mere 1,000 taels of silver. Was this something that the second master of Buddha Lotus Mountain would do? The quadruplets often followed Ji Yinhuang around, so they knew that he was never short of money. He could casually spend thousands of taels of silver, and even tens of thousands of taels of silver was a common occurrence. Wong Kai and Little Pig had an expression that said, your master got a great bargain, which made the quadruplets very unhappy. One of them smiled and casually took out a banknote from his bosom and handed it to Wang Kai's hoof. He smiled and patted Wang Kai's head. "This is 10,000 taels of silver. Use it to buy some snacks. Remember to treat my master well. Also, tell your master to give my master the best medicine. Just tell us how much money you need, and we will not hesitate, as long as you don't let my master suffer any grievances. Also, if you implicate my master in any matters in the future, just tell us if you have any difficulties." Wang Kai was speechless. It looked at the banknote beside its hoof. It was indeed 10,000 taels of silver, and it could be exchanged throughout the country. While it was in a daze, the quadruplets had already disappeared. Yin Huang sat there, his handsome face alternating between green, white, and red. The light around his body flickered, and his forehead was drenched in cold sweat. Because he'd been poisoned by the ice soul poison, the cold sweat had turned into ice the moment it came out. It was as if his forehead was covered with a layer of ice armor. Even his hair and eyebrows were covered with a layer of white frost. He was originally dressed in white, but at this moment, he looked like a lifeless snow sculpture. Tian Xueqing's fingers trembled slightly. She never thought that the cold poison in Ji Yinhuang's body would be so strong. Wang Kai clearly told her that he was fine, that he was getting better and better. She wanted to perform acupuncture on him and expel the poison from his body, just like how she treated her master. However, Ji Yinhuang only shook his head and said, "Protect me." In other words, he would be able to expel the poison himself, and Tian Xueqing would only need to protect him. The way he meditated was something Tian Xueqing had never seen before. Strands of cold air swirled around his body, seemingly condensed yet not condensed. Tian Xueqing did not dare to blindly interrupt him, so she could only stand at the door and guard him. She watched his every move and tightly held a silver needle in her hand. She was prepared to rush forward to save him if he made a single mistake. At this moment, her mind was completely blank, and she could not think of anything. Occasionally, she would raise her head and see G.M.O. standing not far away. He was wearing a light green robe, and he looked like a big tree that she could lean on and rest. Chapter 24-23. Occasionally, she would raise her head and see G.M.O. standing not far away. He was wearing a light green robe and looked like a big tree that she could lean on or rest. He just stood there quietly looking at her and did not disturb her. The master and disciple looked at each other. G.M.O. smiled at her. His smile was as warm as usual, but her heart clenched for no reason. She was no longer as calm as before. Instead, she was a little confused. However, she still smiled back at her master. The master and disciple seemed to have a tacit understanding. "Master!" Little pig, Wang Kai jumped back. Tian Xueqing shushed it, telling it not to make any noise so that it would not disturb Ji Yinhuang, who was meditating inside. Wang Kai pulled out a banknote from its chest pocket and whispered, "Master, look, a banknote worth 10,000 taels." Tian Xueqing was surprised. "Where did you get this?" Wang Kai then repeated what it had said to the quadruplets. Tian Xueqing was silent. It seemed that the Honorable Imperial Uncle Ji was willing to stay here as a servant because of her. No, it was not for her. It was for the crown princess who had the same name as her. He treated her as a substitute for the crown princess who had died young, so he treated her like a pearl and listened to her every word. He did not hesitate to lower himself and become a servant. She closed her eyes. Her heart was in a mess. She felt sour and bitter at the same time. She did not know what she was feeling. After all, she was not even 15 years old. When faced with this kind of messy relationship, she did not know what to do. G.M.O. waved at her from afar. Tian Xueqing let little pig Wang Kai watch over her while she ran towards her master. The master and disciple were talking under a big tree. They could see Wang Kai in Ji Yunhuang's room when they raised their heads. "Xueqing, how is he?" "He is healing himself. Now, he is a little more stable." G.M.O. sighed. "It's all because of me." Tian Xueqing did not want her master to feel burdened. "Master, you don't have to feel sorry. he did it to repay his debt. She was a little lacking in confidence as she spoke. GMO looked at her and saw her looking at Ji Yunhuang's room every few sentences. He sighed in his heart. Xueqing, you, master, there is nothing between us. He's just a patient of mine. He'll leave once he recovers. Tian Xueqing sounded anxious, as if she wanted to distance herself from something. GMO raised his hand and stroked her hair. Don't worry. I know that you don't have any feelings for him, but Master, he's probably treating me like this because of my name, or maybe because I look like the late crown princess. He actually doesn't like me. He'll understand soon enough. Although she was still young, she didn't want to be anyone's substitute. In order to prove something, Tian Xueqing tugged on Jimo's sleeve and shook it coquettishly. Master, Xueqing said that I want to stay by your side forever and be your right-hand woman. Jimo lowered his eyes to look at her. His gaze was slightly complicated. He sighed softly. You were still young at that time. What you said was childish. Xueqing, you'll marry sooner or later. How can you stay by Master's side forever? Then I'll never get married. Tian Xueqing was naturally sensitive and afraid of marriage. It was as if once she got married, she would fall into hell. GMO pressed his palm on Tian Xueqing's shoulder and muttered to himself. His gaze fell on her face again. Xueqing, are you really willing to stay by Master's side forever? I'm willing. Tian Xueqing answered without hesitation. Chapter 24:24. Then I have a way to fulfill your wish. What way? GMO paused for a moment, as if he found it hard to say. In the end, he made up his mind and said, You can marry me. That way, you and I will be master and disciple, as well as husband and wife. Naturally, we can stay together for the rest of our lives. Tian Xueqing felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She opened her mouth slightly and was stunned. She was very peaceful and comfortable beside her master, so she was willing to stay by his side for the rest of her life. But to marry him, she had never thought of this before. This proposal came too suddenly, and Tian Xueqing did not know how to react. Since he had already said this, GMO decided to strike while the iron was hot. Xueqing, don't worry. Even after we get married, we will still get along with each other. I will only treat you better, and our lives will not change too much. The life that she liked would not change. Nothing would change. This should be acceptable, right? Wasn't this what she had always hoped for? Tian Xueqing felt that she should agree, but she could not open her mouth. Her pretty face flushed red. GMO patted her shoulder. Xueqing, I know this is too sudden for you. You can think about it before giving me an answer. There is no need to rush. GMO turned around and left. Tian Xueqing stood there in a daze for a moment before slowly walking back to Ji Yunhuang's room. Fortunately, Ji Yunhuang's poison was controlled in time and did not worsen. Tian Xueqing waited at his door for 4 hours before she finally saw that he had recovered. She heaved a sigh of relief and silently used her sleeves to wipe the cold sweat from her palms. The ice on his body had already disappeared. Although his face was still pale, it was no longer blue. There was also a faint red color on his lips. He had probably suffered too much just now. His body was covered in cold sweat, which had formed a frost armor. When he controlled the poison, the frost armor melted, making him look like he had just been fished out of the water. His white robes were also drenched. He stretched his limbs and then looked at her. His gaze was too complicated, causing Tian Xueqing's words to be stuck in her throat. She held back for a moment and finally squeezed out a sentence. How are you? Not bad. I finally got under control. Ji Yunhuang replied. His voice was extremely hoarse, and he looked exhausted. Oh, that's good. That's good. Tian Xueqing unconsciously replied. Ji Yunhuang looked at her without saying a word. After all, the little girl was still young. Although she tried her best to remain calm, her nervousness and helplessness were practically written all over her face. Tian Xueqing felt her hair stand on end for being stared at by him. She had never been afraid of meeting anyone's gaze before, but now she was afraid of Ji Yunhuang. She stood up and said, Since you're fine, I'll go back first. Your clothes are wet. Go back and change them. I'll get someone to wash them for you. She turned to leave. Do you like your master? Ji and Wang suddenly asked. This question was too straightforward. Tian Xueqing paused for a moment before replying. Of course. The like I'm talking about is the like that I want to marry him. Ji and Wang said word by word. Is that what you like about him? His questions were getting sharper and sharper, as if he was forcing her to face them. Tian Xueqing. She suddenly became angry and blurted out, what does it have to do with you whether I like him or not? Your Excellency is worrying too much. She turned around and left. Ji and Huang grabbed her hand and pulled her back. Chapter 24-25. Ji and Huang grabbed her hand and pulled her back. Tian Xueqing almost fell into his embrace. She hurriedly placed her hand on his shoulder and distanced herself from him by an arm's length. Her face turned red again. Hey, what are you doing? She struggled to get up. However, Ji and Huang held her wrist tightly and refused to let go. His palm was burning hot, as if it wanted to burn into her heart. Xueqing, you should know how I feel about you, so this has to do with me. I like you, the kind of like that I want to marry you. Tian Xueqing froze again. In just a short while, two men had already confessed to her, but she did not feel happy at all. Instead, she was extremely flustered. She did not like marrying or marrying. She did not like it at all. She did not want anyone to disturb her peaceful life again. After all, he had not fully recovered yet, so Tian Xueqing easily broke free from his hand. She took a few steps back and took a deep breath. She said word by word, I'm sorry, but I don't like you. I only like my master. If I want to marry, I want to marry him. You should give up on this idea as soon as possible. After she finished speaking, she did not dare to stay any longer and ran out as if she was escaping. Xueqing. Ji and Huang called out to her and jumped down from the bed. He wanted to catch her, but she ran away so fast that he didn't even manage to catch a glimpse of her clothes. He could only watch as she left without even turning his head back. I only like my master. If I want to marry someone, I want to marry him. Ji Yunhuang's vision turned black. He staggered and fell to the ground. Her last sentence was like a demon's voice that kept ringing in his head. His blood surged, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The moon was like a hook. Tian Xueqing sat on a hillside and looked at the moon in a daze. Her head was still buzzing, as if there were 1,000 bees buzzing in her head. Master! Wang Kai ran over and stopped in front of her while panting. How is he? Tian Xueqing asked. He did not touch the food that was sent to him. He has been cultivating. Other than his pale face, there is nothing wrong with him. Wang Kai reported. Tian Xueqing was stunned. It had already been a day, and Ji and Huang had not eaten a single grain of rice. The food that was sent to him was not touched at all. Was he ruining his body to make her feel guilty? Her heart was suddenly filled with anger. Why should she feel guilty? She had saved his life, and he owed her money. Then, he had saved her master and repaid her debt. He and she clearly did not owe each other anything. Why did she have to agree just because he wanted to treat her as someone else's substitute? They were strangers to begin with, all right. Tian Xueqing was furious as she paced back and forth on the spot. Wang Sai's eyes followed her, and it was almost dizzy. It didn't understand what its master was angry about. Master, it's just that he hasn't eaten for a day. It won't be a problem, right? Moreover, he has cultivated an immortal body, so he should have already abstained from eating. It doesn't matter if he doesn't eat for a few days. What do you know? This kind of poison consumes a lot of his energy, and if he doesn't eat it, it will be even harder for him to get rid of it. Tian Xueqing said angrily. Wang Kai rolled its eyes and gave her an idea. Why don't you feed him? If you feed him, maybe he'll eat it. Tian Xueqing. GMO walked over from a small path and sized her up. What's wrong? Who provoked you? It's that imperial Uncle G who doesn't eat. Master is angry because of this. That person doesn't know how to cherish himself. Master has been researching various ways to treat him, but he is angry because of this. Chapter 24-26. At the side, Wang Kai quickly spoke. Jimo's gaze fell on Tian Xueqing's face, and after a moment of silence, he said, Xueqing, young Master Ji was poisoned because he tried to save me. Since the Netherworld flower can cure this poison, I will go and pick the herbs tomorrow. Tian Xueqing was shocked. That won't do. The place where the Netherworld flower grows is very dangerous, and there are Netherworld snakes guarding it. Master, the poison in your body has not been cured yet, so you can't take the risk. Moreover, the poison in young Master Ji's body is different from the previous poison. I'm afraid that the Netherworld flower alone won't be enough. It needs to be combined with other herbs and techniques. I'm almost healed. What other herbs do I need? Tell me. Gemo refused to give up. Tian Xueqing had no choice but to tell him the other herbs and added, I've already asked Huanyu to send people to look for them. They should be back soon. It turned out that this girl had been preparing for a long time. GMO raised his hand and knocked on her head. I have these herbs with me. Why didn't you ask me for them? Instead, you went to a faraway place? Tian Xueqing's eyes lit up. She remembered that her master didn't have these herbs. She didn't expect that he would have them now. As if he had guessed Tian Xueqing's doubts, GMO sighed and said, After I was poisoned, I've been looking for a way to cure the poison. These herbs were prepared at that time. All right, since I have the other herbs, I'll go and pick the Netherworld flower tomorrow morning. Tian Xueqing was still worried and immediately said, I'll go with you. After all, I've picked the Netherworld flower once and know where it grows. Wang Kai also volunteered. I'll go too. It'll be faster for me to find the flower. GMO knew that his little disciple wouldn't feel at ease letting him go alone, so he agreed. As long as she could pick the Netherworld flower, she would be able to cure Ji Yun Huang completely. At that time, she wouldn't owe him anything. At that time, he would leave completely, and she wouldn't have anything to do with him anymore. Thinking of this, Tian Xueqing heaved a sigh of relief, but she also felt an inexplicable sense of melancholy. Xueqing, I won't let you owe anyone a favor. GMO held her hand. I'll let you live a stable and happy life. Tian Xueqing didn't know why, but she didn't. She opened her mouth. Master, Xueqing, you don't have to be in a hurry to give me an answer. You're still young, and we have plenty of time ahead of us. GMO patted her little hand. All right, we'll set off early tomorrow morning. Rest early tonight. Before Tian Xueqing went to bed, she was still worried and went to Ji Yun Huang's place to take a look. He was still meditating, sitting there with his eyes lowered like a Buddha. His handsome face was still extremely pale, but his complexion was not as frightening as before. It seemed that even though he didn't eat, it didn't affect his body that much. Tian Xueqing didn't want to go in again, so she didn't want to be entangled with him again. She hid in the shadows at the door and looked at him, then turned around and left. Ji Yun Huang meditated for an entire day and night before he managed to suppress the poison. At dusk the next day, he came out of the house. He wanted to have a good talk with Tian Xueqing. He had been searching for her for 100 years, and he did not want to let her go so easily. Tian Xueqing seemed to have misunderstood him. Perhaps she thought that he only treated her as a substitute, but in fact, she wasn't. She had always been Tian Xueqing, just that she had been reborn, of course. If Tian Xueqing truly loved her master and was already in love with him, then he would let go and not break up the two of them. He would rather be alone for the rest of his life than break her up. He would help her achieve her goal. Chapter 24-27. With this goal in mind, he went to Tian Xueqing's courtyard and met Fen Shui. Then, he received a piece of shocking news. Tian Xueqing and her master, GMO, had gone to the mountain to pick the Netherworld flower. They had left early in the morning and had not returned. Ji Yunhuang's mind buzzed. He knew better than anyone how difficult it was to pick the Netherworld flower. He also knew how difficult it was to deal with the Netherworld snake. With his martial arts, he still had to be cautious. Not to mention this pair of master and disciple whose martial arts were mediocre. Although Jimo's martial arts were slightly higher, it was still limited. Moreover, he still had poison in his system, so he could only use 70% of his martial arts. If they encountered several netherworld snakes, the master and disciple's lives would be in danger. He suddenly clenched his fists. Was she in such a hurry to chase him away? She was willing to pay any price for this. He had said that he would find a way to detoxify the poison once he controlled it. No matter how angry he was, he could not ignore her. Without saying anything, he turned around and ran. The wind whistled past. Tian Xueqing carefully walked on the narrow path beside the cliff. Behind her was Wang Kai, who was also cautious. GMO walked in front, his sleeves fluttering. Last time, falling off the cliff had left a deep psychological shadow on her. Now that she was walking here, her heart could not help but pound. Wang Kai looked at Tian Xueqing nervously. It was ready to jump off the cliff to save her at any time. Don't be afraid. Master is here. Jimo's gentle voice came from the front. He did not turn around to know that Tian Xueqing was very nervous. Master's voice clearly had a soothing effect. Tian Xueqing raised her head and looked at his back. She took a deep breath and calmed down a lot. Suddenly, Jimo's body staggered and swayed. Tian Xueqing was shocked. Just as she was about to support him, GMO had already stabilized himself. Master, what happened? Her heart almost jumped out her chest. Her voice could not help but tremble a little. GMO shook his head with his back facing her. I accidentally tripped. Xueqing, don't worry. Watch your step. Tian Xueqing wanted to run over and look at Jimo's face, but the path was too narrow. It could barely fit one person, so she could only give up. After walking for a while, Wang Cai's eyes lit up. It excitedly said, Master, Master, the netherworld flower is in front of us. Their eyes lit up, and they quickened their pace as they walked forward. At the top of the mountain, at the edge of the cliff, a faint blue flower was fluttering in the wind. The place where the flower grew was extremely steep. It was at the edge of the cliff, and the wind on the cliff was very strong. It was so strong that it was almost impossible to stand. Tian Xueqing pursed her lips and was about to walk forward. GMO stopped her. You stay here. Master will go and pick them. Tian Xueqing grabbed GMO's sleeve and carefully looked at his face. A trace of uneasiness flashed through her eyes. Master, is the poison in your body really gone? I see that your face is still a little pale. GMO patted her head and smiled. Xueqing, have more confidence in your master. Tian Xueqing still wanted to say something, but GMO stroked her head and said, Master has been wandering the world for many years and has collected countless rare medicinal herbs. He has never failed before. Don't worry. That was true. Even though Master's martial arts were not as good as Ji and Huang's, he was still one of the world's top experts. Moreover, Ji and Huang's poison could not be delayed any longer. Thus, picking the netherworld flower became an urgent matter. Chapter 24-28. Tian Xueqing let go of Jimo's sleeve and took a deep breath. Master, you must be careful. This flower has the protection of the hell snake and is very powerful. It is poisonous all over and can even spit out poisonous liquid in fog. She explained the characteristics of the hell snake in detail. GMO looked at her gently and knew that she was worried about him. His heart warmed as he smiled faintly. Okay, I will be careful. Although his face was pale, his movements were very nimble. His sleeves fluttered as he walked to the edge of the cliff. When he was a few feet away from the flower, he flicked his finger and a silver needle flew towards the flower. A small blue snake pounced at him at lightning speed. Tian Xueqing's heart was in her throat as she unconsciously clenched her sleeves. Looking at the menacing hell snake, she wanted to go up and help, but the terrain was too narrow. It would be too cramped for the two of them, so she could only watch from the side. Her fingers gripped the hilt of her sword, ready to help if anything went wrong. GMO pulled out his long sword, and a sparkling green light flew towards the snake. The man and the snake fought at the edge of the cliff. The green light was like autumn waves while the blue light was like clear water. They were fiercely clashing. The mountain wind was biting cold, causing Mo's green robe to flutter. He stood at the edge of the cliff, as if he would ride the wind at any moment. There were a few times when his feet were in the air, but he landed steadily every time. Tian Xueqing's heart was like a roller coaster. She was extremely nervous. She pursed her lips tightly, and her face was pale. Even from this distance, Tian Xueqing could see her master's pale face and the cold sweat on his forehead. Her master had just recovered from a serious illness and should be recuperating. Now that he had come out to pick herbs, it must be very taxing on his vitality. He was probably just holding on and not collapsing. Tian Xueqing's heart was burning with anxiety. She held her sword tightly and pursed her lips tightly. She slowly inched forward. If her master was in danger, she would take the hell snake down with her, even if she had to risk her life. GMO was not only good with swords, but also with poisons. He occasionally flicked poisonous smoke and powder at the snake, all of which were targeted at poisonous snakes. After a while, the hell snake's movements became slower and slower. It was obvious that it was at a disadvantage. By the time the man and the snake had exchanged 70 to 80 blows, the hell snake was probably too tired and made a mistake. It crashed into a rock and almost fainted. GMO immediately rushed forward and swung his sword, preparing to cut off its head. Seeing that the dust had settled, Tian Xueqing felt as though a huge rock had been lifted from her heart. The unforeseen event happened in that instant. The hell snake, which had appeared to be dazed from the impact, suddenly leapt up like a bolt of blue lightning towards Mo's face. It was already too late for Mo to dodge. He steeled his heart and no longer dodged. Instead, he slashed out with his sword. In the end, Mo was faster. By the time the hell snake reached him, his sword had already cut it in two. Unexpectedly, half of the hell snake's body was still alive. It opened its mouth and spat out a large mouthful of poisonous fog before falling to the ground. GMO had been sprayed by the poisonous fog, and before the remaining poison had been cleared, a new poison had arrived. The two poisons instantly merged in his body and rampaged through his meridians. GMO did not have time to detoxify himself before his vision turned black. He staggered a few steps and suddenly lost his footing. In the next moment, his entire body fell to the ground. Master, Tian Xueqing was scared out of her wits. She immediately rushed over and grabbed Mo's hand. Chapter 24-29. However, GMO was still a man, and he was still unconscious. Although she grabbed his hand, she was still pulled down by him. It was already difficult for her to stabilize herself and prevent herself from falling, let alone lift him up. Seeing that Tian Xueqing was about to be pulled down, Wonkai Piglet became anxious. Master! It pounced over and bit Tian Xueqing's trousers, trying to hold her down. Fortunately, Tian Xueqing's trousers were made of a special material, so they could not be easily torn or pulled down. Otherwise, she would be exposed. Even so, the situation was still critical. Half of Tian Xueqing's body was hanging in the air. Her hand was tightly grabbing Mo's wrist, and her face was red. Mo was hanging on the cliff with his eyes closed. He was already unconscious. Wonkai Piglet used all its strength to pull Tian Xueqing, but its strength was still not enough to move two people. Tian Xueqing's body slid down bit by bit. Wang Sai's hooves left two deep marks on the ground, but still could not stop her from sliding down. What to do? What to do? If this went on, they would all die. Master was unconscious, and Ji Yin Huang was still cultivating in the small courtyard in the valley. Wang Kai could not rely on it. The only one who could save everyone was herself. Tian Xueqing was hanging upside down on the cliff, and her head was a little red. She took a deep breath and tried to calm herself down. Wang Kai, can you fly now? As long as Wang Kai could fly, it would be able to fly with them if they fell down. Wang Kai was about to cry. It was biting her trousers and could only speak with its nose. Wang Kai was seriously injured last time. Although Master healed me, I can't fly in a short period of time. This was the second time it felt so useless. The first time was when Tian Xueqing was in danger and it was unable to protect its master. Ji and Huang came to save her. The second time was now. At such a critical moment, it actually dropped the ball. If its master died, it would not live anymore. It wanted to accompany its master. Master, I'm sorry. Tian Xueqing's last hope was destroyed, and her heart was filled with despair. However, it was impossible for her to give up on her master at this time. Two people and one pet slid down uncontrollably. Tian Xueqing had already slid down the cliff, and only Wang Kai Piglet was still hanging on. With its last bit of strength exhausted, Wang Kai could not hold on any longer. Its legs went soft, and its whole body slid out of the cliff. Hanging in the air, Tian Xueqing felt like she was falling straight down like a cannonball. The wind was howling, and she could barely hear anything else. She quickly passed through the clouds and fell into the abyss. The rapid fall made her heart almost jump out of her chest, and her head felt dizzy. He was falling so fast that Tian Xueqing couldn't catch him at all. She watched as his hand slipped from her palm. Master! Tian Xueqing desperately tried to touch his hand, but she was always a little short. Jimo's eyes were still closed as he silently fell down. Tian Xueqing's heart was filled with grief. Her master had come here to pick herbs to make her feel at ease. Since everyone was going to die, then let's die together. Only then would she be able to live up to her master's kindness in raising her. Only then would she be able to live up to her master's kindness. Ji Yunhuang's figure seemed to flash in front of her eyes, and her heart felt like it was being pierced by needles. She never thought that last night would be a farewell. Chapter 24:30. She struggled with all her might, trying to grab the corner of her master's clothes. Close. Even closer. Just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. At this critical juncture, Tian Xueqing suddenly felt her waist tighten. A white light descended from the sky and wrapped around her waist. That white light first sank down, reducing the force of her fall. Following that, it suddenly pulled her upwards. Before she could react, her entire body flew upwards. All of this happened in a flash. When she finally reacted, she had already landed on the cliff. Her legs were numb from the impact, and her vision was a little blurry. Her head was still throbbing with pain. Her legs went soft, and she fell towards a rock. The expected pain did not come. She was caught off guard and fell into a cold embrace with a faint medicinal fragrance. Her eyes suddenly widened. It's him, Ji Wang. He actually rushed over at this time. This person always appeared from the sky at the most crucial time. Tian Xueqing did not need to raise her head to know who this embrace belonged to. Her nose turned sour, and she almost wanted to cry. She was still in a state of shock, and even her body was trembling. Ji Yunhuang originally had a stomach full of anger, but when he saw her pale face, that anger could not be vented. His heart softened, and the arm that was hugging her waist tightened. He gently comforted her. Don't be afraid. Everything is fine now. Tian Xueqing's body was still trembling uncontrollably. She suddenly thought of something and broke free from Ji Yunhuang's embrace. She suddenly turned her head. Master. There was no one behind her. Only Wang Kai Piglet was still lying there with a confused face. She looked around in panic, but did not see a single trace of her master's clothes. Master. Her voice trembled and changed pitch. Where's my master? My master didn't he save me? Ji Yunhuang's fingers tightened. He pursed his lips and said in a hoarse voice, I only saw you. He only had time to save her. I fell down with my master. You should have seen him. I almost caught him. Tian Xueqing's heart trembled in panic. Her voice was filled with disbelief. She suddenly turned her head and looked at Ji Yunhuang. You really didn't see him? Ji Yunhuang's face was extremely pale. His clothes were almost drenched in cold sweat. He forcefully held his breath and shook his head. When he rushed over, they had just slid down. When he rushed to the edge of the cliff, he could only see Tian Xueqing's skirt. GMO was below Tian Xueqing, so he did not see him. Furthermore, The ice soul poison in Ji Yanhuang's body was still wreaking havoc. When he pulled Tian Shueqing up, he had used up almost all of his strength. Right now, he could barely stand. Tian Shueqing's heart turned cold. Although she had come up, her heart seemed to have fallen into an endless abyss. She stood there in a daze, her expression absent-minded. Master didn't save me. Ji Yanhuang said Tian Shueqing, I am sorry. Tian Shueqing acted as if she did not hear him. She turned around and wanted to rush towards a cliff. Master, Ji Yanhuang is hard to Shueqing. Shueqing. Tian Shueqing flung his hand away and took a step back. Tears were streaming down her face, and her voice was sharp. I don't need you to care about me. I want to save my master. Ji Yanhuang clenched his fists and said in a low voice, He has already fallen down. You can't save him. Calm down, let's think about it. Chapter 24:31. Ji Yanhuang clenched his fists and said in a low voice, He has already fallen down. You can't save him. Calm down, let's discuss this. He knew that his words were too cruel, but at this time, he had to let her see the truth. He was afraid that she would do something stupid, so he held her arm tightly. Tian Shueqing pushed him away. Her actions were too violent, and Ji Yanhuang staggered from her push. He barely managed to stand up straight. Shueqing. Tian Shueqing was flustered and lost her usual calmness. She spoke without thinking. You want me to give up on my master? How can you be so ungrateful? My master fell down because he wanted to pick herbs for you. You don't want to save him, and you want to stop me from saving him. It's all your fault. If you didn't cause so much trouble, how could my master fall down the cliff? If my master dies, will you be happy? Let me tell you, you're dreaming. Even if my master dies, I will not marry you. I hate you the most. She couldn't continue speaking. She suddenly turned around and ran towards a cliff. She wanted to see if there was a way to go down. Before Tian Shueqing reached the edge of the cliff, her vision blurred and she bumped into someone's embrace. That person staggered from the impact, but he still firmly held on to her. She suddenly raised her head. You. She choked on the word. Ji Yanhuang's eyes were pitch black, without any light. They were as dark and cold as a bottomless abyss. He looked at her condescendingly, his expression dark and gloomy. The shadow cast by him enveloped her whole body. This was the first time Tian Shueqing felt such a strong aura from Ji Yanhuang. It was cold and unfeeling. I have never wished for your master to die. Never. You wait here, I will go and save him. He had put in so much effort, but all he got in return was an ungrateful word. He had never walked into her heart. Ji Yanhuang, was simply a joke. Their relationship in this lifetime was simply a joke. She only had her master in her heart. Then he would fulfill their wish. After he finished speaking, he flew down. Tian Shueqing only saw a white figure floating down. She hurriedly ran to the edge of the cliff, but she only had time to see his fluttering clothes that almost merged with the white clouds. He didn't look like he was flying down, but more like he was falling. Tian Shueqing's heart almost sank. She clenched her fists, her fingertips digging into her flesh. She suddenly remembered that Ji Yanhuang still had the ice soul poison wreaking havoc in his body. He basically couldn't use his psychokinesis. Then he rushed over in a hurry and saved her. She was afraid that he was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Now he was forced to jump off the cliff. Just now, his face was actually very frighteningly pale. Would anything happen to him if he jumped down like this? Her heart felt like it was being gripped by something, and her body began to tremble slightly. She tilted her head to listen to the sounds below, and her heart hung in the air. After a while, Ji Yanhuang's voice resounded from below, carrying a distant echo. Although his voice wasn't loud, it was clearly transmitted into Tian Shueqing's ears. Throw down a rope that is long enough. About 200 feet. He was still alive. He spoke. She knew that he had an immortal body. He was someone who could fly, so a small cliff would not be a problem for him. Tian Shueqing's heart finally relaxed a little. My master, how is he? She couldn't help but ask as she searched for a rope in her backpack. Chapter 2432. There was a long silence below. The silence made Tian Shueching's heart jump. What? What? My master. My master. Is he? Is he? She did not dare to ask the rest of her question. He's still alive. Ji Yanhuang's reply finally came from below. Thank the heavens. Master is still alive. Tian Shueching heaved a sigh of relief. She finally found a long rope, but it was obviously not long enough. She looked around and found a few sturdy vines, which she tied tightly to the rope. Then, she threw the rope down. Is this okay? She asked the people below her. She did not know why, but she always wanted to talk to him, wanted to hear him speak. Tian Shueching felt the rope in her hand sink slightly. Ji Yanhuang's voice came again. It's okay. Tie the rope to the thick tree. This time, his voice was much softer, even a little hoarse, as if he was forcing himself to speak. Tian Shueching's heart suddenly twisted, as if someone was tightly gripping her heart. She felt unspeakable guilt and sadness. She felt that the words she said when she lost control of her emotions were extremely hurtful. Now that she thought about it, she wanted to slap herself. When he comes up later, she must apologize to him properly. She must expel the poison and treat his injuries, and see if he has any external injuries. Tian Shueching anxiously looked at the edge of the cliff, then nervously looked at the rope. It was obvious that someone was pulling the rope up. The rope was constantly tightening, and a huge tree creaked from the rope. Tian Shueching looked at the rope that was as taut as a stick, afraid that it would not be strong enough and snap. Her heart tightened again and again. She could not help but reach out and grab the rope, using all her strength to pull it back. The rope tightened, and Tian Shueching's nerves were like the rope, tensed up into a straight line. Ji Yanhuang held the rope with one hand and carried GMO with the other, half supporting him as he moved up. The rope was wrapped around GMO's body. His head was full of cold sweat, and his vision was blurry. His vision was turning black, and his body was getting colder and colder. It was as if countless ice needles were rampaging through his body, causing him unbearable pain. Not only was the pain painful, but the most terrible thing was that his hands and feet were weak. Originally, he carried a person up the cliff as if he was walking on flat ground, but now he felt as if he was carrying 1,000 pounds of weight. He knew that he was nearing his limit, probably because the rope and the edge of the cliff were worn out too much. A strand of the thick rope could no longer bear the burden and suddenly broke. The rope trembled. His and Jimo's bodies also sank down slightly. Tian Shueching's heart almost jumped out of her chest. The broken rope was on the edge of the cliff, so she couldn't reinforce it or connect it. She took a deep breath. Are you guys all right? Ji Yanhuang raised his head and looked at the top of the cliff. His heart almost sank to the bottom of the lake. There was still a distance of several hundred feet between them. However, the rope could no longer support the weight of two people. Thinking of Tian Shueching's frantic look, his heart twitched. He smiled bitterly. She treasured GMO so much. If GMO died, she would be very sad, right? He had never wanted to upset her. Can the two of you say something? Tian Shueching's voice sounded again, and it sounded like she was about to cry. Ji Yanhuang lowered his eyes and indifferently replied, Don't worry, your master is very good. Then, without saying anything else, he carried GMO and climbed up. Chapter 2433. Tian Shueching was so nervous that she almost couldn't breathe. When she heard Ji Yanhuang's voice, she felt slightly relieved but also distressed. He only said that master was very good. What about him? How is he? Tian Shueching wanted to ask, but she was afraid that she would distract him. She could only swallow the words that were about to come out. She was so nervous that her hands and feet were cold, and her face was pale. Snap! Another strand of the rope broke, but Ji Yanhuang didn't even look at it. He mobilized all of the remaining psychokinesis in his body, took a deep breath, and flew upwards with GMO in tow. He would risk his life to protect the safety of his beloved, There were only 2 strands left of the 4 strands of rope. These 2 strands were constantly being pulled apart, making a slight snapping sound. At this time, they were still a few feet away from the top of the cliff. Tian Shueching could see the 2 people hanging on the cliff. She was so excited that her hands were trembling. They were coming up. They were coming up. The unforeseen event happened at this moment. The rope broke, and the 2 people who were less than 2 feet away from the top of the cliff fell down. Tian Shueching cried out in alarm, "No!" Jian Huang was quick-witted. He bit the tip of his tongue and gathered all the psychokinesis in his body into his palm. He slapped GMO, and GMO's body flew up. He fell powerlessly into the bottomless abyss. Tian Shueching's head buzzed. Her face instantly turned pale. Jian Huang. She reached out to grab Jian Huang in vain, but she only grabbed air. Jian Huang's body was already exhausted beyond its limit. The ice soul poison could no longer be suppressed, and it ran rampant in his body. He couldn't even move a finger now, so he didn't have the strength to fly up. Looking at the cliff that was getting farther and farther away, he was unwilling. He was just a little bit away from the gate of life. Just like his relationship with Tian Shueching, it was always a little bit away. Perhaps this was his fate. They always missed each other. He smiled bitterly and closed his eyes. He, Jian Huang, was never the type to sacrifice himself for others. He didn't expect that there would be a day when he would sacrifice himself to save his love rival. Hearing Tian Shueching's heart-wrenching screams, he opened his eyes again. Separated by a thin layer of clouds, Tian Shueching's face had already become blurry. He couldn't see her expression clearly, but he could imagine that she was extremely heartbroken. What a wonderful cycle of fate. Last time, in order to save Shu Amo, she was buried in the snow mountain. This time, in order to save GMO, he fell off the cliff and died. They had all sacrificed their lives for others and let down the people they loved the most. Jian Huang looked up at the layers of white clouds that were gradually thickening. He sighed as he said his last words, "Shueching, take care." Tian Shueching's head buzzed and her entire body stiffened. Tears had already crawled all over her face, and her heart felt as though it had sunk into a deep valley filled with sharp knives. It was so painful that she felt as though she was about to vomit. That intense pain caused her entire body to spasm. She suddenly felt an immense sense of fear, as though she was about to lose the most important thing to her. She desperately tried to grab the air with her hands, but there was only air that she could not grasp. Yin Huang. Her cry was heart-wrenching, sharp and mournful, but she couldn't get any response from him. With teary eyes, she looked on helplessly as Jian Huang fell through the layers of clouds and disappeared. That take care was still echoing in the valley, as though it was his final farewell. It was also his endless instructions to her. Chapter 2434. Take care. How would she take care of herself? How would she take care of herself when she saw him fall into the abyss? Her heart ached so much that it felt like it was going to split open. How would she take care of herself? She had never thought that he would die. She had never thought that he would have a moment of helplessness. But just now, he had fallen so helplessly. She could not do anything about it. His face was so pale, and his white robe was covered in patches of red and white. It was obvious that he was severely injured. How could he survive if he fell like this? Her head buzzed, and she was about to jump off the cliff. She had forced him to his death, so she did not want to live anymore. "Master!" Wang Kai grabbed her trousers and shouted. "Master! He is an immortal. He won't die from falling off the cliff. Don't do anything stupid. He won't die. Maybe he will still be alive." This faint hope allowed Tian Shueching to regain some of her senses. She was really scared now. Her hands and feet were cold, and she felt as if something was going to break out of her heart. Countless memories were spinning in her mind, and every one of them had his face. He came with his sword and cut the netherworld snake in half. He hugged her in his arms and comforted her softly. "Shueching, don't be afraid. I'm here." When she found out that her master was poisoned by the netherworld poison, she panicked. He patted her back and said gently, "Shiweching, don't be afraid. I'm here." When she fell off the cliff, he pulled her up and patted her. "Shiweching, don't be afraid. I'm here." He had always been protecting her. When she was in danger, he descended like a god and defeated all the difficulties for her. Then, he hugged her and told her not to be afraid because he was here. Unknowingly, he had become her pillar of support. She was not afraid of any difficulties because he would come, but now he had fallen off the cliff. The clouds covered his face, and she could only hear his sigh. "Shiweching, take care." She had never thought that he would say goodbye to her like this one day. She did want him to leave, but she never wanted him to die. Wang Kai's black eyes were filled with tears. It did not expect Ji and Huang to be so loyal. It had never thought that its master would be so sad, as if the sky had collapsed. Tian Shiweching suddenly stood up and murmured, "I want to find him. I want to find him. You are right, he won't die. I won't." He turned around and wanted to run down. Wang Kai hurriedly shouted, "Master, wait. Master's poison hasn't been cured yet." Tian Shiweching stood there in a daze, as though she didn't hear him clearly. She looked at Wang Kai in a daze. Wang Kai repeated again, and Tian Shiweching's eyes gradually regained focus. Wang Kai saw that its master had regained consciousness, and it could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Tian Shiweching's heart was in a mess, and her mind was barely working. Only when he saw GMO lying there did he realize that he had to detoxify his master. How could he have forgotten? How could he forget to detoxify his master? Clearly, Master was the most important person to him. Could it be that she had already fallen in love with him? A thought surfaced in her mind, and her heart immediately trembled. Impossible. Impossible. She had always liked her master. It was Master. But what was with the suffocating feeling in his heart? Why was she so sad for Ji and Wang? She had to calm down. Calm down. Save Master first. Save Master first. Tian Shiweching felt that there was a ball of fire burning in her heart, and it was also as if she had been frozen for 1,000 years. She was indescribably anxious and cold. Chapter 2435. She took out a detoxification pill with trembling hands and stuffed it into Ji Mo's mouth. She wanted to apply the needle, but her trembling hands searched for the silver needle on her body. She used to be very efficient, but now she couldn't find the silver needle. Her vision was blurred, and she couldn't see clearly. Her mind was also blank. Wang Kai was almost afraid of Tian Shiweching. It said softly, "Master, you should take a rest first." You. She was like this now, so it was easy for her to have problems. Tian Shiweching finally found a silver needle and wanted to stick it into Ji Mo's body. Wang Kai suddenly screamed, "Stop! Master, that's a poison needle!" Tian Shiweching paused. Her vision was blurred, and she couldn't see anything clearly. After focusing for a long time, she could see that the silver needle in her hand had been dipped in a bright green color. She hurriedly threw out the poison needle as if it was a hot potato, almost stabbing Wang Kai Piglet. Wang Kai was shocked and shouted subconsciously, "Master, you almost stabbed me." It looked at Tian Shiweching subconsciously. It was stunned by what it saw. Tian Shiweching looked at it. Her eyes were misty, like the mist in the early morning. Her tears were falling down one by one. She cried miserably, like a helpless child. Gradually, her skirt was soaked by her tears. This was the first time Wang Kai had seen Tian Shiweching cry like this. In its impression, its master had always been a calm and collected divine doctor. It had never seen her cry so miserably. This was the first time she had shown the panic of a 14-year-old child. However, Tian Shiweching only lost her composure for a moment. She knew that the situation was urgent, and she didn't have much time. She wiped her face and stood up. Although her voice was still trembling from crying, she had calmed down a lot. She checked GMO's pulse and then took out a red pill and fed it to GMO. She then ordered, "Wang Kai, I've cured Master's poison. You take Master back and put him on a warm jade bed. Give him a clear jade pill every 2 hours." She threw a red medicine bag to Wang Kai and ran down the mountain. Wang Kai shouted behind her. Master, where are you going? Tian Xueqing didn't look back. I'm going to find him. Wang Kai, take Master back. Be good. Wang Kai looked at Tian Xueqing, who was running away, and subconsciously wanted to chase after her. However, when he saw GMO, who was still unconscious, he stopped. It suddenly thought of something and took out something from a small pocket in front of its chest. It raised its hoof and threw it up. Boom! A beautiful blue firework in the shape of a lotus flower exploded in the sky. Wang Kai stared at the fireworks and prayed in its heart. Hopefully, the quadruplets would keep their word and arrive in time. Tian Xueqing ran down the mountain path and utilized her qing gong to the extreme. She was so anxious that she almost fell down several times. Jitian Huang, don't die. After running for an unknown amount of time, she was already exhausted, but she still ran without caring about anything else. Her tears had long dried up, leaving 2 tear stains on her delicate face. Her face was almost frozen stiff, and she couldn't feel any warmth. At the end of the run, Tian Xueqing's legs were almost numb. Every breath she took was as painful as being cut by a knife. She suddenly staggered, her legs went soft, and she fell to her knees. She had hit the ground very hard, and a layer of skin was scraped on her knee. Blood was flowing down. Chapter 2436. She fell very hard, and a layer of skin was scraped on her knee, causing blood to flow down. She did not even bother to bandage her wound. Instead, she hurriedly sprinkled some medicine on her wound and continued to run down. When she was about to reach the bottom of the valley, she suddenly slipped and her whole body rolled down uncontrollably. At the bottom of the cliff was a deep pool, and the water was so clear that one could see the bottom. Tian Xueqing rolled down and almost fell into the pool. She ignored the pain all over her body and crawled up. She looked around, and her voice was filled with fear. Ji Yunhuang, where are you? She looked around, but could not find him. The fear in her heart had reached its peak. Just when she did not know what to do, her gaze suddenly froze. She then opened her eyes wide and looked at the center of the pool. There was a mist above the pool. The milky white mist lingered on the surface of the pool. From afar, it looked like a white sea of clouds. The wisps of mist drifted about, and one could vaguely see something floating above. Tian Xueqing opened her eyes wide and saw that there seemed to be a white shadow above. Found him! But her heart was happy at first, but then it suddenly sank, as if there was a weight in her heart. Is he still alive? Tian Xueqing suddenly did not dare to go forward. Her heart was beating like a drum. No matter what, I have to get him out first. He is such a strong person, so he cannot die. Tian Xueqing looked at the deep pool in front of her. She took off her outer clothes and jumped in. Cold. The pool water was so cold that she almost jumped up. The cold air was like ice threads that entered her skin and wandered around her body. Her face was pale from the cold. Her long black hair was dyed in the water like a drop of ink on a piece of paper. She stared at the white shadow in front of her. Her heart was beating faster and faster, as if it was going to jump out of her chest. Close, even closer. Ji Yunhuang's white robe was floating in the water. His eyes were slightly closed, and his long eyelashes cast a shadow under his eyelids. His face was pale, and his lips were thin. The surrounding fog floated around him like clouds, lingering around his body in wisps. This scene was extremely beautiful. He quietly floated there, as if he was sleeping. Tian Xueqing finally swam to his side. She pursed her lips tightly and nudged him. Her voice was filled with hope as she gently called out, Ji Yunhuang. With this push, her heart suddenly sank. It was too cold. It was not the body temperature that a normal person should have. His body was like ice, emitting a chill. The pain hit her like an avalanche, almost suffocating her. Tian Xueqing's hands trembled violently. Her eyes turned red, but she held it back. He couldn't just let him float on the water. She couldn't just leave him here. Even if it meant she had to bring him back. Tian Xueqing hugged his waist and swam with him to the edge of the water. His coolness with a slight medicinal fragrance lingered around her body. It was so familiar that she wanted to cry. Her eyes turned red and her vision blurred. Hugging him did not make her feel at ease at all. Instead, she was filled with endless panic and fear. Could he be dead? Why was his body so cold? She hugged him, but she couldn't feel any signs of life from him. He originally had the ice soul poison in his body. Previously, he was just barely suppressing it. He should have been lying on the bed and recuperating, but he ran over to save them. And now he fell into the icy pool. The more Tian Shueching thought about it, the more afraid she became. Her heart felt like it was being pierced by a row of needles. Chapter 24:37. When she was about to reach the shore, Tian Shueching suddenly felt her calf twitching. Her heart sank. She tried her best to straighten her feet and endure the numbness. She swam forward with all her might and finally reached the shore before the second wave of numbness came. When she reached the shore, the cold wind blew, causing her to shiver. She was so cold that her whole body was trembling. She took off Ji Yunhuang's drenched clothes, revealing his chest that was as white as jade. Then, she draped her coat over his body. She trembled as she checked his pulse. She felt as if her heart had been hit by a sledgehammer. Her limbs and bones were in pain. The constant heartache made her feel as if she was going to vomit her heart out. There was no pulse. There was no pulse. Tian Shueching's face turned pale, and her eyes lost focus. He was dead. He was so powerful, yet he was dead. Impossible. She did not believe it. Tian Shueching did not give up and continued to check his pulse. She exposed his chest and stared at it. There was a thin layer of frost on his face. His entire body was like an ice sculpture. There was no breath, no heartbeat, no emotional fluctuation. He was just an ice sculpture lying there quietly. There was no pulse. There was no movement. He was dead. He was dead. What should she do? What should she do? As if all the strength in her body had been sucked away, Tian Shueching sat there powerlessly, with tears falling like rain. Her tears dripped onto his ice-cold hands, emitting wisps of white smoke. At this moment, she suddenly felt a weak pulse. Tian Shueching was shocked. She wiped away her tears and carefully checked his pulse. His pulse was very weak and intermittent. If not for Tian Shueching's attentiveness, she would not have felt it. He was still alive, but he was lingering around the gates of hell. Tian Shueching immediately became nervous. Her hands were trembling. She patted her face and forced herself to calm down. Don't panic, don't panic. Time was running out. He could die at any time. Tian Shueching took a deep breath. She first pried open his mouth and fed him a life-extending pill. Then, she took out a silver needle and started to prick his body with difficulty. This life-extending pill was a divine medicine that she had specially developed. It could prolong a person's last breath, but it could only last for 6 hours. She didn't have anything else on her right now. She didn't bring any other medicinal herbs, so she couldn't give it to him. She could only use the silver needles to seal his acupoints to prevent the poison from spreading further. Then, she would bring him back as quickly as possible. Tian Shueching was calculating rapidly in her mind, but the needles in her hands were very steady. She accurately inserted them into the corresponding acupoints. Hiss, hiss, a sound rang out not far away. It was the unique sound of snakeskin sliding across the grass. It was getting closer and closer to them. Based on the sound of friction, they could tell that it was a large snake. A silver-white snake slithered forward, its tongue sticking out as it slowly approached. The snake arched its body, clearly a sign that it was about to attack. However, Tian Shueching did not even look at him. Even though she was sweating profusely, her movements did not slow down at all. Her movements were as smooth as flowing water. Now was the crucial moment of acupuncture, and she could not afford to be distracted. With a gust of wind, 4 more people appeared out of nowhere. The 4 of them were wearing the same clothes and looked exactly the same. The youngest of the quadruplets saw that Ji Yunhuang was not breathing, and her heart sank. She wanted to rush forward. Mas, One of them reached out his hand to stop her and covered her mouth. He said sternly, "Miss Ah Ching is performing acupuncture on Master. Don't disturb her." Chapter 2438. One of them reached out to stop her and covered her mouth. He sternly transmitted his voice. "Miss Ah Ching is performing acupuncture on Master. Don't disturb her." He looked worriedly at Ji Yinhuang, who was covered in silver needles, and Tian Xueqing, who was sweating profusely. He then looked at the snake that had started to retreat. He raised his arm and made a gesture. The four twins understood and immediately split into four directions to protect the two people in the middle. One of them took care of the silver snake, with the four of them guarding them. Not even a fly could enter. The time it takes for an incense stick to burn passed. 2 hours passed. Tian Xueqing was so cold that she almost lost consciousness. Her head was dizzy, and every breath she took was scalding hot. She was running a high fever. This fever came very quickly. Not long after, her whole body became weak, and her hands started to tremble slightly. She tried her best to keep her eyes open and persevered. After another half an hour, Tian Xueqing finally pulled out the silver needles. After removing the last silver needle, she wanted to stand up. However, her vision suddenly turned black, and she fell down weakly. One of the four twins caught her. Tian Xueqing opened her misty eyes and tried her best to wake up. However, darkness quickly attacked her and nibbled away at her consciousness. Before she lost her consciousness, she grabbed that person's sleeve and reminded him repeatedly, "Bring him back to the tranquil mountain. Remember, you must carry him flat. Do not move at all." The darkness came like a tide and completely drowned her. "Xueqing, take care." Ji Yinhuang looked at her deeply and took a step back. He fell down the endless cliff. "No!" Tian Xueqing suddenly woke up. The darkness scattered like shooting stars. When Tian Xueqing opened her eyes, she saw Ji Mo's worried face. She was stunned for a moment, and her eyes were filled with confusion and helplessness. "Master!" Ji Mo touched Tian Xueqing's forehead and sighed in relief. "Everything is fine now." Tian Xueqing grabbed Ji Mo's sleeve. Her eyes were filled with weakness and nervousness. "Master, where is he?" Ji Mo's eyes moved. "I have already refined the antidote. I just gave it to him last night." "He has already taken the antidote? Does that mean that he is already awake?" Tian Xueqing's heart was filled with joy, and her eyes couldn't help but reveal a hint of joy. "Master, has he woken up? How is his physical condition now?" GMO looked at Tian Xueqing in silence. When she opened her eyes, all her questions revolved around Ji Yinhuang. She didn't ask him how he was doing, nor did she ask herself how she was doing. Jimo's silence made Tian Xueqing, who had just calmed down, worry again. She carefully asked, "Master, could it be that he hasn't woken up yet?" Fear was like a tidal wave that slapped at her heart. The look in Jimo's eyes was indifferent. He was looking down at her from above. His appearance was somewhat cold. This was the first time Tian Xueqing had seen GMO like this. She was stunned for a moment before she finally realized that there was something wrong with his mood. Her eyes were filled with doubt as she asked, "Master, what's wrong?" GMO looked into her eyes. His usually gentle eyes now had a hint of sharpness. "Xueqing, tell Master the truth. Have you already fallen in love with Jian Huang?" Tian Xueqing stood there in a daze for a moment. She loves Jian Huang? That's impossible. She should only feel guilty towards him. He fell down a cliff to save her master, so she felt very guilty. That's it. Furthermore, Jian Huang's feelings towards her should only be transference. Chapter 2439. Furthermore, Ji Yinhuang's feelings for her should only be transference. The one he truly loved was his crown princess who had died young. The reason why he was so good to her now was only because he saw her as a substitute for that person. Tian Xueqing's heart was filled with bitterness. She had never wanted to be anyone's substitute. GMO did not disturb her when he saw that she was in a daze. He only looked at her quietly, but the expression in his eyes was getting heavier and heavier. She had been thinking for a long time. Her eyes were half bright and half dark. It was obvious that she was struggling. If she did not love him, the answer should have been out of her mouth. Why was she struggling for such a long time? She was already moved, but she did not know it. Jimo's heart was getting heavier and heavier. Tian Xueqing finally came back to her senses. She looked straight into Jimo's eyes and firmly shook her head. Master, you think too much. This disciple does not love him. This disciple just feels guilty towards him. Jimo looked at Tian Xueqing with a complicated expression. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he only sighed. Tian Xueqing looked at him for a while, then subconsciously looked away. She suddenly remembered that her master had not answered her question. Her heart jumped, and she asked again, Master, is he awake? Jimo shook his head and simply spat out 4 words, She's still unconscious. The poison had clearly been cured, so why was he still unconscious? Tian Xueqing only felt a burning anxiety in her heart. She could no longer lie down and wanted to get out of bed. Jimo raised his hand to stop her. Xueqing, where are you going? You should take care of your body. You have been unconscious for nearly 3 days. Tian Xueqing felt as if there was a fire burning in her heart. Master, I just want to see him. I just want to see him. She did not know if she was saying this to Jimo or herself. Jimo's eyes were so dark that it was hard to discern his expression. It is useless even if you go. What does he mean by it is useless even if I go? She felt as if she had suddenly fallen from the sky. At that moment, her heart almost stopped beating. Master, what do you mean? She only realized that her voice was trembling when she spoke. Jimo sighed. Forget it. You should go and see him yourself. Tian Xueqing's heart suddenly sank. Countless terrifying guesses appeared in her mind, but she fiercely slapped them back down. She jumped out of bed, hurriedly put on her shoes, and stumbled out. Jimo stood in the same place, looking at her back as she ran away, deep in thought. Heavenly Fragrance Court. With the quadruplets guarding the door, not even a fly could enter. Seeing Tian Xueqing stumbling over, they respectfully said, Miss Qing. Then, they made way for her. Tian Xueqing nodded slightly and rushed into the room. With a creak, the door was pushed open, and sunlight poured into the room like a tide. It lit up the room, and it also lit up him. The calming incense in the room burned slowly, hovering in the air, bringing a fragrance and tranquility to the room. A man in white was lying on the bed. He had a handsome face, a pale complexion, and thin lips. On such a beautiful spring day, when Yuan seemed to have stopped in front of him, no longer moving forward, leaving him alone as cold as snow. His entire body exuded a faintly discernible chill. Tian Xueqing pursed her lips and stepped forward. Her fingertips trembled slightly. They were slightly cold as they touched his skin. The warm and soft touch almost made her cry. Although his body temperature was still somewhat low, it was much better than the coldness of a dead person before. Chapter 2440. She felt for his pulse. It pulsed faintly under her skin. He was still alive. No matter what, he was still alive. Tian Xueqing suddenly had the urge to hug him and cry. She was scared out of her wits when she saw her master's hesitant look. She thought that he was dead and would never come back. Fortunately, he was still alive. As long as he was still alive, there was hope. But since he was still alive, why did her master look hesitant? Her heart had just calmed down a little, but it immediately rose again. She took a deep breath and calmed her heart down. Then, she began to examine him carefully. Tian Xueqing checked him from head to toe, and her face became paler. He was breathing, his heart was beating, and he could react instinctively to external stimuli. But he was unconscious. He did not have any consciousness at all. He was clearly lying peacefully in front of her, but Tian Xueqing felt that there was a world of distance between them. He was already in a vegetative state. On the 7th day, 2 of the quadruplets were missing. Tian Shiweching walked in with weak steps. Her face was as pale as a ghost, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She was very dizzy, and the world was spinning with every step she took. She had not slept for 6 days and 6 nights. For the past few days, she had been reading all kinds of medical books like a madwoman, looking for a way to cure Ji Yinhuang. She took countless kinds of medicinal herbs and threw them into his mouth as if they were free. She also poured bowl after bowl of medicinal soup into his mouth. Then, as if waiting for a verdict, she stayed by his side and stared at him, hoping for a miracle to happen. But it was useless. There was no effect at all. It was not like this had never happened before. In fact, Tian Shiweching had cured many people who were in a vegetative state, and she had found many ways to cure them. But none of those methods worked on him. Was it because he was a deity? She immediately went to look for ways to cure him. Over the past few days, she had tried all kinds of methods and remedies, but none of them worked, no matter how hard she worked for days and nights without sleep. She could only watch him lose his life bit by bit. His heartbeat became slower and slower, and his pulse became weaker and weaker. His body became colder and colder. He was dying bit by bit, but she could not do anything about it. Tian Shiweching walked to the bedside and looked at the face of the person lying on the bed, which seemed to be carved from cold jade. She was in a trance. His legs went soft, and he fell to the ground, his vision turning black. She held his wrist that was as cold as snow, and the coldness flowed through her pores, penetrating her limbs and bones. His pulse was so weak that it almost stopped a few times. If this continued, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to survive the night. For the first time, she felt powerless. She had healed everyone in the world, but she could not wake him up. She didn't owe anyone a debt, but he was the only one she regretted. His tears dripped on her hand, but she did not seem to feel it. She only held on tightly to his hand and said with a trembling voice, "Jin Huang, did you purposely smash my plaque? Do you think I owe you something? I haven't even blamed you for treating me as a substitute, but you're blaming me first? How can you be so unreasonable? You're the one in the wrong. You're the one in the wrong." Tian Shiweching's consciousness was already in trance. She hadn't slept for several days and nights, so her mind was in a mess. She was almost unconsciously repeating this sentence. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.